Hello. Ooh, hello. We're up close here. Ooh. 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 Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How you doing? How you feeling? Another stream to do. Oh man. How do these guys do it? It's all the lights, everything. How are we feeling? I saw Trent Dabs in chat said, what about the chocolate milk? See, the thing, I love chocolate milk, but chocolate milk is really bad for broadcasting or singing or like anything to do with speaking or using your mouth, because it's just so thick and delicious. It's literally the worst thing though if you're trying to be a broadcaster and trying to talk and stuff. But yeah, we're gonna get into some stuff. I'm just gonna try to clean this up a bit. This looks like a mess. Look at this. So just come on. I eventually would like to be streaming on Rumble and other platforms as well, but I think it's most important to just actually be here, to actually stream. Gotta stream. Gotta make sure that I'm actually streaming. Streaming comes first, always. Gotta be there for the people. Yeah, we're trying to save free speech in Canada. If you're just tuning in, I'm just setting some stuff up for the stream here. What are we going to be talking about tonight? We're going to be going over this CIJA video. CIJA is the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs. They actually have a debate about Bill C-63. Spoiler alert, I'm pretty sure they're all for the bill. They have some concerns with some aspects of it, but they are more or less pushing the bill, which is it's a good learning opportunity for us. If you've tuned into the stream before, it's all about steel manning the argument in favor of stopping free speech or to pass this bill C-63. So I want to look into this, want to look into that chat that they have. Going to be reacting to some other content and also going over the fact that if you didn't know, Bill C-63 is being already included in the federal budget, or being talked about and being budgeted out. 300 employees, $200 million to police your internet comments. The thought police are coming. And it's kind of okay and kind of fun to make fun of it now. We should make fun of it even if it were to pass, but it's best, let's just humiliate these tyrants now so the bill gets thrown out, and then we don't actually have to deal with this in real life. Let's do this thing called standing up, standing on guard for thee, and defending the freedoms of this country, which made it so good to begin with. It feels like we're in the fourth quarter and we really need to pull off a miracle here, but I think we can do it. I don't know what this page is going to look like, but hopefully, let's see. This might be a mess. 1 second here. Oh, there's nothing there. Let's see what this looks like. You guys can't hear me. It's gonna be quiet for a sec. Just everybody sit tight, okay? It's gonna be an awkward silence here. Just sit tight. Sit. And we're back. Did you miss me? We're back. Did you miss me? All right. Is that looking good? All right. You can't really read that. This is a quote from CIJA, Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs. Today we join Minister Varani Arif, MPs, and those who have been directly and painfully affected by online hate and abuse for the tabling of Bill C-63, the Online Harms Act. Anti-Semitism is flourishing online and across Canada. We welcome this long-awaited legislation. That was tweeted on February 26th, 2024. That was right when the bill was tabled. So it's interesting that we're going to later watch a clip of them debating it, although they are, if I'm not mistaken, literally standing behind them with all of their muster to try and pass this bill. But censorship has never helped us. This bill is authoritarian garbage. Good point. This guy actually makes pretty good TikTok content when his stuff is not being totally censored. Let's see what he's looking at. What are we looking at here? Any good recent videos from this guy? Bill Gates has the scoop. Arrested. Let's listen to this. because this guy's content is decent. It's nice and short, but let's see.
You can now be arrested for what you post on social media. But MPs can betray their country, get away with it, burn down a church, vandalize a synagogue, get away with it. You can now be arrested for what you post on social media.
So true. He's pretty good at the quick, like, concise messaging. Sorry, we'll do that full screen. Sorry, you guys can't see that. There we go.
But MPs can betray their country, get away with it, burn down a church, vandalize a synagogue, get away with it. You can now be arrested for what you post on social media. But
so true. So true. Where's the like button? Boom. Boom. Yeah, so true. So freaking true. So, yeah, we are trying to save free speech in Canada. Started SaveFreeSpeech.ca. I'm going to throw all my content effort behind stopping this bill. If you want to help us save free speech in Canada, you can go to givesendgo.com/SaveFreeSpeech. How are we doing? Yes, we're almost at the $4,000 mark. Very exciting. A lot of huge donations coming in. You love to see it. It's going towards content that's going to ring the alarm bells on Save Free Speech. On Bill C-63, we need to stop this bill. It's a little loud, says EdgyDTV. My voice is a little loud? Interesting. Maybe I'll just move the mic back. Is that better? Is that better, sir? Maybe I could do this as well. Let's try that. Is my voice a little loud, or is it the background music? Anyone insulting, quote, old stock Canadians will continue to have free speech, of course. Absolutely. That's absolutely right. And more on that when we react to the CIJA stuff, because, you know, I was kind of tuned. I watched a little bit of it. I want to react to the most of it tonight, not all of it, because it's kind of long. But, yeah. Because essentially we have a group of people who are Jewish, looking out for Jewish people, and they're deciding this bill is going to be beneficial for us, for our group, our tribe. And as Lyle Crawford said, anyone insulting old stock Canadians will continue to have free speech, of course. Yeah, you know, like, do we think that Bill C-60, if we were, let's say, a tribe of, you know, white European Canadians, let's say, do we think this bill is going to be beneficial for us? Let's see what happened at the trucker convoy. Let's see what's happened to all of the churches that have been burnt down. Let's see all of the statues which have been torn down. It seems to be a kind of like consistent sort of hatred for white Canadian folk. I don't know if the bill is going to address that. Something tells me, though. Something tells me that it might not. But yeah, all right, let's get into it. Let's get through this article and get into this video. All right. Creating online harms regulators expected to cost Canada $200 million. Now, I don't have the tweets on hand, but you'll see, you know, conservative MPs, some conservative MPs have tweeted about this, basically saying, it's going to cost $200 million. Can you believe this? It's going to cost $200 million. I'm more upset about the fact that, we wouldn't have freedom of speech anymore, and the liberal biased, far left biased Canadian government would have free reign to basically persecute, potentially imprison and throw in jail your base, Conservative Party, your base, people who vote for you, people who support you. That's who's going to be thrown in jail for this bill. It's going to cost so much money. I do not give a fuck about how much money it's going to cost, sir, member of parliament, conservative member of parliament. I'm more concerned about myself and my friends and everyone who's actually standing up to fight for this country getting thrown in jail. I'm more worried about more political prisoners. I'm more worried about tyranny being on the rise. It's going to cost $200 million. It's so irritating that this seems to be like the only language that the Conservative Party of Canada speaks. It's like, okay, new law is going to pass that basically outlaws anyone with conservative sentiment. It's basically you guys will be second-class citizens. You won't have a right to free speech. And people can make fun of you, but if you criticize anyone at all, you'll get thrown in jail. And the Conservatives are like, well, how much does it cost? Maybe there's an argument we could make of because it costs too much money. Like, there's no way I could just come out and oppose this for being totally morally wrong and a complete, absolute. What's the word? It's worse than a failure. It's worse than a humiliation. It's a total insult. It's a travesty to the country, and it costs too much money. That's my only concern. Well, it costs too much money. That's my only problem with. Okay, so if it was cheaper, then persecuting conservatives would be fine. Persecuting people who are too far right, that would be a-okay if it was just a little bit cheaper, right? Okay. Well, as Conservative Party, we're going to make sure our censorship brown shirts are more affordable. Great. We're going to make sure your mass migration is more affordable. Saves you money. Still going to be a lot of, there's still going to be a lot of Pajeets everywhere, invading your communities, invading your spaces, and replacing you in the workforce, but it's going to be more affordable. Bring it home.
Building your online business?
An ad? Come on, bro. Yeah. You guys have heard this all before, but still, it bears repeating. All right, let's get back into this article. Let's get through this. Creating online harms, regulators expected to cost Canada $200 million. Parliamentary Budget Officer Yves Guiraud waits to appear before a committee at the Senate in Ottawa. This was back in June. This article, though, this article's from July 4th. Staffing the new regulators in the Liberals' Online Harms Act will cost around $200 million over 5 years, according to a new analysis released by the Parliamentary Budget Officer on Thursday. The report looks at the federal government's pledge to establish a digital safety commission to regulate social media companies and force them to limit harmful content online. Big tech already does this. It's crazy how this doesn't get brought up. It's going to come up in the video that we're going to react to, but it's like they act like big tech doesn't do anything to already regulate online harms, which if you witnessed during COVID, it was a whole industry of censorship and silencing people who ended up having the right opinion on things during lockdowns. So, they already have a censorship problem, quite frankly. A lot of the big tech platforms, probably aside from X. But this idea that, no, the government actually is going to do a better job at censoring the internet. Yeah, okay. CBC, this is a comment from Jennifer Francis. CBC 22 Minutes made a comedy skit about replacing white people and everyone will be brown in the future. I remember this, yeah. It was a whole kind of cool MTV style skit or music video about becoming beige. It was like a rap about everyone becoming beige. It's crazy, man. It's crazy. And that's the thing when you look back in the history of Canadian media, especially late 90s, early 2000s, it's everywhere. It's written everywhere. The writing is on the wall all over the place. All right. If the legislation passes in Parliament, that commission would establish a set of regulations and have the power to levy fines against companies that break the rules. Okay. Will the CTV News mention the fact of house arrest? Do you think they'll mention house arrest in this article? Put a 1 if you think they're going to mention house arrest in chat, and put a 2 if you think CTV will not mention house arrest and the more egregious things in Bill C-63 in this article. The Online Harms Bill also proposes creating a digital safety ombudsperson that Canadians can bring their concerns to, as well as a new digital safety office. In a report released Thursday, the PBO says the Heritage Department estimates those new entities will employ about 300 people when they're fully up and running. Imagine 300 people working at anti-hate. I'm pretty sure there's only like 5 or 4 or 5, maybe 8 that are actually like employed on a salary. And then they have probably, I'm kind of guessing. This is all kind of like guesswork. I don't actually know this for sure, but if I had to guess, probably, 6 to 10 people on their on salary, and then probably a dozen, maybe 2 dozen. Realistically, a lot of Antifa people don't actually do stuff, so it's probably only like 5 people who just kind of like try to feed them information in all these silly Twitter threads trying to cancel right-wingers. But imagine having 300 salaried bloggers and sleuths online to try and misrepresent your Facebook comment to call you racist. The point is, well, this is really why I'm saying it's like it would be the end of free speech. It's like literally creating a small army of people to make it their job, financially incentivized to police the internet. And if you don't think there's going to be a left-wing bias, you're just completely stupid. No offense. Based on everything we've seen from this liberal government, the trucker convoy, the political prisoners, the traitors in parliament, after all of that, the far left bias, after all of that, the faulty legislation that's already been passed with the Online News Act, can't even see news on Meta, Facebook, and Instagram. After all of that, you're still going to give this government the benefit of the doubt and say, no, I think they'll do a good job here. Actually, this time, I think they're going to do a good job on Bill C-63 and the Online Harms Act because it's called the Digital Safety Office. It's called the Safety Board. They wouldn't lie to us again, would they? They wouldn't be totally wrong again. Oh my God, they're pushing a political agenda and they're just being polite and acting polite and nice to pass more legislation, to act more tyrannical. I can't believe that. Even though there's been example after example after example of that, especially since 2022. It's understandable when the people who are far left will kind of just repeat the same talking points and say, yes, this bill is good for us. It's going to stop hate, blah, blah, blah. But it's totally crazy when right-wing people, conservative MPs, give this regime, this liberal Trudeau regime, the Canadian government regime, whatever you want to call it, the globo-homo Canadian regime, the benefit of the doubt. Like, they still give it the benefit of the doubt despite everything we've been through. And that's another reason why I really kind of resent Pierre Poilievre, because he has successfully de-radicalized people and lulled them back to sleep in this regard, to be like, no, everything's fine, guys. Everything's fine. No, it's not. Everything is not fine. All right. Where are we at here? So here we go. Let's finish the rest of this article. Let's put this in the corner here. Okay. Oh, I didn't check the 1s and the 2s. How did we do here? We got a lot of 2s. A lot of 2s that they are not going to bring up not going to bring up any of the egregious things in the bill. Hey, turn the volume up. You want the volume up now? All right, let me turn it up a little bit. Just boomer tech. I feel like I have boomer tech issues right now. Come on. There. Boom. Let's try that. Is that good enough? Is that good enough for you guys? Is that good enough? All right. Cool. All right. CTV News. The Online Harms Bill also proposes creating a digital safety ombudsperson that Canadians can bring their concerns to, as well as a new digital safety office. In a report released Thursday, the PBO says the Heritage Department estimates those new entities will employ about 300 people when they're fully up and running. The PBO estimates that from 2024-25 to 2028-29, the total operating costs will be $201 million, minus any possible administrative monetary penalties, fines, or regulatory charges collected by the Commission, Ombudsperson, and Office. So I'm guessing that's assuming that this is money they will be receiving, collected by the Commission, Ombudsperson, and Office. Like aside from the politics of the left and right and how this is about tyranny, it's like there's just such a gross misunderstanding of how the internet works. And it's just a bunch of bureaucrats who are like, let's get some of that big tech money. Like it's literally people from an older generation who do not understand new media. They're obsessed with trying to have their state-approved, state-funded media like the CBC, and they just are so bloodthirsty, lusting after more control and influence over new media, which is the internet. And if they can't get that, then they're going to steal a piece of the pie. They're going to take their money back from big tech. It's totally misguided. It's like some old person clutching on to something, and it's like, bro, just let it go. Just let it go, okay? Your old media sucks. You can't compete in the new media sphere. Stop just ruining everything because you cannot accept the way the world is. Anyway, the report notes the government may collect revenue by fining companies that don't comply, but he estimated costing does not include an analysis of what that could look like. They don't even know. It's the same thing as Bill C-18, the Online News Act. They're like, hey, let's do this. Let's try to force big tech to pay us for a free service that they already provide news platforms. Meta called them out on their bluff and said, fuck you. We're just not going to share the news anymore. So there you go. So, but once again, here they are. They don't know. There's a high degree of uncertainty in the revenues. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know what they're doing with this legislation because they don't know how big tech is going to react. They've taken years to develop this bill, but they still don't know shit about what's actually going to happen. Like, the more you look into this bill and the actual experts who are presenting it and trying to pass it and budget for it, they don't even know. They don't know because it's brand new. They're literally just power and money hungry bureaucrats. They're government employees, and that's why we really need to win. We're up against government employees, you guys. They really don't give a shit about what they're doing. They really, all they care about is their pension. We should be able to beat these people. We should be able to beat these people handily. Okay. Costs may also be higher if the new entities decide to use outside consulting services or legal support. Why would you need legal support? Oh, yeah, they don't know what they're doing. Right. The watchdog notes that the government's staffing estimates are based on other Canadian and international regulators. Justice Minister Arif Farani introduced the Online Harms Bill in February, saying social media giants must take accountability for harmful content. Once again, Justice Arif Farani says it's here to protect children online, yet says absolutely nothing about MindGeek. They have a different name now, but it's a massive pornography enterprise that's situated in Canada. Are they included in a social media giant? No, they're not. Because this bill is not about protecting kids from sexual exploitation. It's about controlling speech. That's why it says social media giants and not we're going to go after the porn websites. It's right there in black and white. It's obvious. But the opposition conservatives have been critical, saying it will accomplish nothing more than create a new bureaucracy. Again, not good enough, not good enough. Not good enough. We know that they have tyrannical intentions. We know that this is it's going to be such a far left bias towards old stock, white, Christian Canadians. It's just going to be more bureaucracy. It's just going to be more expensive bureaucracy. No, it would be the end of free speech. It would be the green light to hunting down political opposition. Real political opposition, Conservative Party. You guys don't count. You guys will be fine, of course. Still pushing mass migration for fuck's sakes. Oh, pardon my language. I'm just, trying to be Trying to be civil. Hey, just calm. Hey, just calm down. Everybody calm down, okay? Calm down. It does feel good to vent a little bit, though. Chris Freestone says white guilt sickens me. Yeah, I kind of agree with that. Yeah, it's sometimes there's different versions of white guilt. Sometimes it's subtle, and it kind of manifests as subtle white guilt would manifest as something like, Subtle white guilt manifests as I don't know. It's very subtle. It's very subtle, but it's always kind of there. It's always kind of like the, oh well, I'm not gonna actually share my opinion on that. I'm not actually going to. Oh cool, like oh wow, there was we have a diverse workforce. It's a very sort of timid and sort of, oh yeah, no, I'm hip, I'm with it. But the more explicit white guilt, I agree, is totally sickening. When people sort of like just excuse themselves and insist that they are not important because they're white. And of course, it's never explicitly said like that. But like one of the most horrible examples would be like a white couple, married couple, who are like, well, we're not going to bring kids into this world, climate change. And there's already people coming in with mass migration. So we're just going to take care of our dog. Like that's crazy. That's crazy, sickening. And like they don't even know how insane it is because they're so indoctrinated. It really is such a spiral of just like, oh God. Then again, there's positives in there, folks, because at least we're not that far gone, At least we're actually aware of what's going on. I know it can be very overwhelming and that sort of thing, but it's not. At least we're aware of we're seeing the world as it is, and we're watching ourselves live through history, right? Man, I really should have shaved before this. My God. Dan the Oracle, Greg Wycliffe, why do you keep emphasizing Christians? You think old stock white Canadians who aren't Christians are somehow going to get a break? I don't think I'm emphasizing Christians that much, but look at what happened during lockdowns, and specifically Christian pastors were picked on specifically because they are representing a community of probably mostly white old stock Canadians. But when a Christian pastor like Archer Pawlowski, for example, who got thrown in jail for delivering a sermon at literally speaking words for 10 minutes, got equated to destroying infrastructure. Some crazy charge got levied against him for literally speaking. But they targeted these figureheads for a reason. And I think when a Christian is actually like practicing properly, i.e. like they're not waving trans flags around, because you can definitely make the argument that religious institutions have definitely been weakened and that some of these communities are basically compromised with woke politics, progressive politics. Don't disagree with you there. However, it depends on the community. It depends on the Christian, depends on the leader, the faith leader, whatever. And the good ones actually do speak out. They speak out in favor of protecting children from the gender ideology and all these things that we're fighting against, like tyranny. And they get targeted, especially when they are leading a community, because that's a powerful thing, right? When Christians get together and they have a strong community and they're tight knit, like the government doesn't want tight knit communities. It's another reason why they went after Diagolon. So I'm not saying it's just Christians or it's just non-Christians. Like, it's just a kind of another point of reference that's totally relevant to this. And it's also worth mentioning because compare it to the other religions. We're very sensitive to anything happening to Jewish people or mosques in this country. Synagogues or Muslims in this country. It's almost like a war over the airwaves over, should we mention anti-Semitism more or should we mention Islamophobia more? Which is the more sensitive? Over 100 churches have burnt down in the country. How many mosques have burnt down? How many synagogues have burnt down? Like, it's not even close. It's not even close. Like, that disparity is obviously worth mentioning. And, you know, if we're going to pick a tribe, so to speak, as old white stock Canadians, and we're going to associate more closely with one religion or another, it would obviously be Christianity. And, you know, we can save this for another stream, but we like the right wing in Canada, especially if you're further right. I get it if you don't like religious institutions. I totally get it. Totally fair. Okay. But this sort of hostility towards Christianity, I don't understand it. I don't understand why that's why that's happening. There's nothing but sort of mutual benefit between someone who's far right and what a true Christian man or woman wants for the country. You know, like, hey, if you have a problem with certain parts of scripture, you think certain churches have trans flags, obviously, yeah, sure, complain about that. But it's like this kind of wholesale rejection of, you know, like Christians who are on the right wing. You know, you can criticize them for supporting Israel too much. Like, sure, yeah, do that. But like the wholesale rejection of it, I don't understand where that comes from with some people. All right, let's get back to this article. Oh, we have a Conservative MP being mentioned. Okay. Conservative MP Michelle Rempel Garner requested the PBO analysis on the cost that would be involved in setting up the new system. She has argued the government could instead modify existing laws and regulators to ensure Canadians are better protected online. Once again, terrible frame. Terrible frame. You know, guys, winning arguments is all about how you frame the debate, okay? And this frame is, well, we could protect kids online in some other way. So they're validating the premise of the bill by saying, oh, yeah, this is totally about protecting kids online. Rejected by saying this is tyrannical. She says, the Liberals' controversial legislation have received significant criticism from concerned Canadians and raised alarm amongst legal experts and civil rights advocates, she said in a statement. Now we learn Trudeau will spend over $200 million of taxpayers' money on his useless 330-person censorship bureaucracy. That's better. That's an improvement. She used the word censorship instead of using that money to hire police, protect Canadians, and lock up criminals. Yeah, this is definitely an improvement. But once again, I want more. I want more. It's there should be a wholesale rejection of this bill. The party also sent an email blast to supporters asking them to help Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre defeat what it called the three-headed monster, or a trio of liberal bills that seek to regulate tech giants. I mean, not bad. As much as I criticize Poilievre and the Conservatives, they do make good strategic moves here and there. I just really wish they would drill home the fact that we shouldn't, you know, we're still stuck in the liberal framework, unfortunately. In addition to the proposed online harms bill, the Liberal government has laws on the books that regulate online streaming services and social media platforms that display Canadian news content. This is referring to Bill C-11 and C-18. C-11 I call the Algorithm Act, and C-18 is the Online News Act. What's the official name for C-11, actually? I'm actually not even... yeah. It amends, it amends the Broadcasting Act. Jeez. I like the Algorithm Act, though, because it basically wants the CRTC apply to apply to online content. Anyway, Poilievre often accuses Prime Minister Justin Trudeau of censorship in reference to those bills, while the Liberals say the Tories are guilty of peddling misinformation about what the legislation actually does. Bullshit. Varani's office has not yet responded to a request for comment about Thursday's costing analysis. The file landed on his desk after being previously assigned to the Canadian Heritage Minister, years after Trudeau first promised to legislate against online harms during the 2019 election campaign. Experts widely panned a consultation paper released around the time of the 2021 federal vote, which proposed a 24-hour takedown rule for content flagged as harmful, an approach they said risked censoring legal content and chilling free speech. probably music here. I'm going to read that again. Experts widely panned a consultation paper released around the time of the 2021 federal vote, which proposed a 24-hour takedown rule for content flagged as harmful, an approach they said risked censoring legal content and chilling free speech. That feedback prompted the government to return to the drawing board and assemble a new expert advisory group. So they're still pushing for this in the bill, though, or something close to that. And what they're referring to here, back in 2021, the bill was called Bill C-36. Now it's called Bill C-63, and it was all confusing. But it used to be called Bill C-36, and it was all labeled that the bill was about stopping hate speech and hate speech propaganda, blah, blah, blah. And because that left a bad taste in people's mouth, it sounds like, hey, sounds like you're trying to chill free speech. Then they rephrased it to, we're going to protect kids online, because that's what they did in the UK, and they got that bill through. And look what's happening in the UK. Look what's happening in the UK now. I should actually watch a video on that. We'll watch a video on that in a sec, because obviously it's relevant and it's pretty terrifying. It's pretty terrifying. They're basically emptying the jail of violent criminals so they can put white people who are complaining about mass migration and crime and even worse behavior, the worst types of crime, throwing white people in jail for complaining about it on the internet. It's just totally shameful. It's just beyond. It's beyond evil. It's beyond being evil and traitorous to your country. It's like I don't even know. The current bill has prompted criticism by civil society advocates and legal experts over its criminal justice reform, which include proposing stiffer sentences for hate-related crimes, and reinstating a controversial section of the Canadian Human Rights Act that would allow Canadians to lodge complaints about hate speech. So, in other words, they alluded to the worser parts of the bill, but they did not at all go into detail explaining what that is. So, everyone who said 2 in chat, you're correct. I don't think anyone even said 1 in chat to thinking that they were going to mention that part of the bill. Not surprising. Trent Dabb says a woman was arrested in BC for mean tweets. This sure was. They arrested her and they didn't even know what they were going to charge her with. Isn't that cool? Isn't that funny? David Ryan said shared to gay Facebook. Hey, nothing wrong with Facebook. Come on. Thomas Gordon says, why is this bill required? Is there a lot of complaints? Crime needs to be reduced? ? This bill is not required. It is it's thinly veiled authoritarianism. They're saying that it's going to defend kids online, but the bill is really intended to give the government more power over its citizens, over the speech and thoughts of its citizens. People express themselves online. Now there is a whole bunch of tools. I call it the tyranny toolkit. It's going to give them a whole bunch of tools to persecute political opposition in this country. And if you don't think that there is an agenda to persecute political opposition in this country, I would like to let you know about this little thing called the Trucker Convoy. It happened in 2022. And essentially everybody, nurses, doctors, truck drivers, blue-collar workers, white-collar workers, people who worked at banks, everyone in between who was opposing the federal vaccine mandate, they were all vilified by the government, told that they were hateful. They had their bank accounts frozen, some of them, and the people who are more prominent leaders and effective at opposing the government were thrown in jail, were levied with all sorts of trumped up political charges. They weren't speech charges. None of them were about specifically speech. But if you boil it down, and if you're honest with yourself, this government was like, let's target these people who have these opinions that are opposing our mandates and opposing what we're doing to our subjects. And then this massive protest happened for 3 weeks, and they were beaten up by police. Usually in a democracy, a free country, if there is a massive protest like that, usually in a democracy, there will be a conversation between elected officials and the upset citizens, but that didn't happen. They were just crushed by a police horse. So Thomas Gordon, if you still think, like, if you're still giving this sort of corrupt regime the benefit of the doubt, I would say that you're a little misguided, and that this bill is actually just more of the same. It's more of tyrannical intentions to control the subjects in this country. And yeah, that's what we're going to be. That's kind of a long story short. That's what we need to do at Save Free Speech to convey to people who don't understand this, because the people in this chat probably know what's going on. They probably know about all that, what's happened during the trucker convoy, and how freedom is kind of like a punchline to a lot of Canadians who truly see what's happened in this country, to people who speak out. But not everyone knows that, and not everyone has taken the time to explain that to them. Because sometimes if you send someone a Rebel News video, you see David Menzies being like, oh my God, I got pushed over, and like, Trudeau, it's over, Trudeau, oh my God. You send that to like your normie friend or your center leftist friend or whomever, their apolitical friend, and they're like, yeah, Rebel News is kind of kooky. I don't know if I believe you. I don't know if that's actually happening. I don't know. That guy has a weird hat on. He's got a weird fedora on. Is that really? Don't want to associate with that guy. But and yeah, I don't even know if I'm really kidding with that. I feel like I was 80% serious with that critique of Rebel News. Like, I really don't know how often sending their videos to other people really helps convince. Do Rebel News videos help convince people outside of our echo chamber? That's a good question to reflect on. Because sure, if people agree with you already, people already hate Trudeau, they already see the tyranny, send them a Rebel News video, they'll probably nod along and be like, totally agree. But if you send it to someone who is apolitical, who's a centrist, who is whatever, not following this stuff, they might be like, I don't know, that seems like a little alarmist. And I think there's a lot of a potential benefit to just kind of take the time to explain to people, hey, this is what's happened at the convoy. There's political prisoners in this country now. Yeah. If we look at history, usually we refer to political prisoners and a rise of tyranny, and we really see that as a bad thing. And, oh, well, I would have heard about this on the news. Yeah, well, the news is paid for by the government now, so that's why you haven't heard about it. And that's just an example of how, that's just the beginning, really, of how deep the rabbit hole goes, or how deep the corruption goes in this country. CTV News has been lying to me? Yeah. Yeah, it has. Yeah. Remember when they said everyone who didn't get a vaccine was like the worst ever, and then they totally kind of backflipped and like no one cared anymore? You remember that? Oh yeah, I do remember that. Yeah. Try to keep that at the front of your mind, please. All right, what was I gonna do again? We were gonna look at. I'm gonna look at some stuff sent to me relating to what's happening in, we're going to do a quick detour to the UK, a foreshadow of how awful things can get if we don't do anything. Let's see what we got here. I think this is a few days old now. Oh, one day ago. From the BBC. Wow. Protester jailed after chanting at police. It's not just online either. It's not just online, eh? 67-year-old man was jailed after chanting, "You're not English anymore," at police officers during a violent demonstration. David Notley of Buckhurst Hill in Essex was among supporters of far-right organizations that took part in the protest in London on the 31st of July. He was among 120 people who were arrested during violent scenes in Whitehall 2 days after the 3 fatal knife attacks in Southport that prompted disorder across the country. Notley was jailed for 20 months after he admitted violent disorder and causing religiously aggravated distress. Notley was jailed for 20 months after he admitted violent disorder and causing religiously aggravated distress at Inner London Crown Court. What the fuck? Okay, I'm gonna quickly write this down as a note. What the hell does that mean? Notley was jailed for 20 months after he admitted violent disorder and causing religiously aggravated distress. Like, are these hate crimes? Are these hate crimes in London or something? I don't get it. And it's funny how it's like, yes, he was arrested with other violent people, but yeah, he was just shouting. See how they're doing this, where they're just kind of they've been doing this for years, or trying to do this for years, conflating violence and hate. Conflating violence and hate together. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. And they did this seamlessly in this article, saying he shouted. Oh, by the way, he was with violent people. So, like, what's the difference, right? The rule of law is the difference. Was the person committing a crime? Oh, they were just shouting? Throw them in the paddy wagon, boys. I got to work on my accents. Jeez. Bottles and cans were thrown at police and flares launched during the trouble last month. Alex Agbamu, prosecuting, said Notley made his way to the front of the crowd and confronted police in a fighting pose, surging back and forth. Are you kidding me? Standing is violence. Posing is violence. Mewing is violence. Gonna get my mew on. The comedy writes itself. Like, you couldn't write this. Notley also joined in the chat, "You're not English anymore," and saying derogatory remarks about Islam. He helped push another demonstrator into a police officer, which precipitated a physical confrontation involving the police and demonstrators. Mr. Agbamu Ugabuga added that Notley then remained at the front of the crowd, as if that's like a crime. This is bonkers. This is freaking bonkers. Let me guess, they have no comment section. BBC. I mean, at least they kind of reported on the facts, because even if you add up the facts, it's like you can see the insane bias here. So what is he guilty of? He's guilty of a fighting pose. He's guilty of saying, "You're not English anymore." He's guilty of singing derogatory remarks about Islam. I'm not seeing any laws broken here yet. He helped push another demonstrator into a police officer. I mean, if that's a charge, let me know. Is that a charge? Was someone pushing him? Was it one of those things where you're in a sea of people and you get pushed? Dude, it's a lot easier to cope with this because it's not happening here. And I don't even want to say yet, because how about this, guys? How about we see what's happening and start to organize to stop it? And that's going to take ringing the alarm bells, creating a professional organization, getting people on board, and stopping this legislation from passing. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do with SaveFreeSpeech.ca. Okay? Ringing the alarm bells. We can see what's already happening in the UK. Plain as day. If we don't do something about it, if we don't try to organize and stop this legislation from passing, then this is our future. This is our future if we don't stop Bill C-63. If you want to support our mission, go to SaveFreeSpeech.ca, or if you want to help, really help, then you can support our GiveSendGo, givesendgo.com/SaveFreeSpeech. We're creating a documentary all about the true nature, the true tyrannical nature of this bill, the far left bias of this bill, what it's really about. And yeah, I'm super pumped. Hey, we got a donation here from Droff Wark for $20. Thank you so much, sir. Really appreciate it. You're going to help us save free speech. Oh, man, I'm pumped. I'm honestly pumped. I'm pumped. It's high stakes. You know, some people will say it's too late, Greg. It's too late. But I don't know. I think there's still time. I believe if we keep going, then good things will come. Good things will come. Please provide for those who are less fortunate. Amen. Edgy DTV in chat says, arrested for mewing while white. Real. Sorry, officer. Was I mewing too hard? Sorry, officer. Was I in a fighting pose? I apologize. Arrested for having too strong of a jawline. Imagine that was in the article. The man had a strong jawline and was clearly going to the gym. He was clearly had violent intent. He was singing a song. You guys, and it hurt people's feelings. Throw him in jail, please. Unbelievable. All right, I think there's another video to watch here. Can we do this?
We will guarantee a prison cell. We will make sure that those people who need to be in prison will be in prison, not necessarily in the area where they live.
Hold on.
They may be 200-300 miles away from home, but we will guarantee people a prison cell.
With the numbers are so tight there, how can you make that guarantee?
We will guarantee a prison.
Sorry, my stuff just froze there for a sec. I'm gonna try to get this up on screen here. 1 second.
We will guarantee a prison.
Okay. 1 second, guys. 1 second. Just give me a sec. Trying to get this on screen for you, okay? I'm a total newbie at this, all right? Still trying to get better at this. Oh. There we go. Nope, that doesn't look very good. Does that look good to you? That does not look good to me. There we go. All right, let's watch this video here. Let me turn the music off. This is from We the Media or End Wokeness on Telegram. The caption says, holy shit, the UK is releasing 5K prisoners to make room for anti-immigration protesters. Some of these will be violent offenders, i.e. the 5K prisoners being released will be violent offenders. Let's watch this from the beginning.
We will guarantee a prison cell. We will make sure that those people who need to be in prison will be in prison, not necessarily in the area where they live. They may be 200-300 miles away from home, but we will guarantee people a prison cell.
With the numbers are so tight there, how can you make that guarantee?
They are tight, and that's why we've initiated Operation Early Dawn. So basically, the easiest way to describe it is 1 in, 1 out. So as people get released, we can then pick up people from police cells and take them to court, and we will triage that 3 times a day.
Are you fucking kidding me? What a piece of shit this man is.
We will guarantee a prison cell. We will make sure that those people, the easiest way to...
Dude, this needs to be, this like, I mean, we have people like this in Canada too, but oh my God. Operation Early Dawn? Operation Let Violent Criminals Out into the Street. I mean, man, like, where do you even begin? Where do you even begin with somebody like this, with a situation like this? What the hell, man? That's so crazy. Oh, so what's most infuriating about this, of course, is, and I remember seeing a ferryman post about this a couple of weeks ago, because what is that ginger's name again? I'm so glad when I forget her name. Oh yeah, Rachel Gilmore. She made a quick TikTok about this, saying like, there's all these anti-immigrant protesters happening in the UK, and it's basically because like they're just really far-right idiots, and they're like totally bad people. And Ferryman's commentary was, are you going to mention the fact that 3 young girls were stabbed to death at like a Taylor Swift little dance thing? 3 young white girls were stabbed to death, brutally murdered. Are you going to talk about that? You know, and then we have these Brits on the BBC saying, well, are we going to be able to throw these white people in jail for complaining about the immigrants? It's like, so you're not, no mention at all. Like the mention of the murdered kids is just The white murdered kids, just brushed aside. Don't really care about that. Brushed aside. White murdered kids, just, no, not really. It's, I can't believe these white people are angry. We need to throw them in jail quicker. Operation Early Dawn. It's more dystopian than here. It's more dystopian than here. And, again, it's exciting. It's exciting because we still have a chance. We still have a chance to stop this, I think. I think we do. Yeah, that's it's going to be a long fight though. It's not going to be simple. It's not going to be easy. Look how oh my God, that's disgusting. That's just vile. That's villainous. That's detestable. Gross. All right, we're going to watch. I'm just going to check the chat for a second, and we are going to watch this. We're going to get into this video, this CIJA video in a second. So you guys are saying in the chat. This sounds like the Soviet Union in the early 1900s, says LGD-TV. Is there a precedent for that? Letting violent criminals out of jail and then throwing in the dissidents? Hope Coop Boys. Oh well, says hope the Coots boys sue, but can they? Question mark. Is that why they are being forced to plead guilty for garbage? Question mark. I don't know. I haven't had the to use a cringy corporate word, I haven't had the bandwidth to keep up with what's going on with the different Coots men. But shouldn't we be calling them men instead of the Coots boys? I know it's like sounds, maybe it makes them sound more like innocent and we need to save them, but they are men who, did I think something patriotic. Yeah, I mean, the problem with the legal proceedings is that when it comes to this is kind of my interpretation. I'm not a huge law guy, okay? I'm still trying to become more versed when it comes to how to understand the law, and especially all these different cases for different political prisoners and everything. But it's my interpretation that if you are going to sue the government or sue some large governmental entity, you're kind of up against an enemy that has infinity money in a way. Like, they kind of have so much money, and they also might have strings to pull to make it as painful as possible for anybody who's trying to sue them. I.e., if you want to continue to try and sue us, we are going to make it very expensive for you. We're going to make it longer and longer and longer and push it off for years and years and years and years. And that's kind of, I'm kind of like a broad brushstrokes guy, and that's kind of my understanding is you can try, but it's probably going to be very expensive, very painful. And will you even get justice in the end? When you're facing the government, they have so much more tools at their disposal to try and get away with it and not be held accountable. And once again, another reason why I'm trying this approach of creating videos with SaveFreeSpeech.ca, where just throwing everything at the wall over and over again on this topic, and making it a part of the conversation, forcing the conversation, forcing politicians to feel discomfort and pain from the pressure that they're receiving. Why haven't you talked about Bill C-63? Why haven't you talked about the Online Harms Act? Why aren't you talking more about that? Why aren't you opposing this? That's the plan. That's the plan, and part of that plan is to do our due diligence, is to do our research, do our due diligence, do our research, and to, to see what people are saying about this bill, to steelman the argument in favor of Bill C-63, in favor of this censorship. And I found a tweet today that's going to kind of introduce us into that. Maybe I'll start with the tweet beforehand. Oh, by the way, while we are on Twitter, follow Save Free Speech on Twitter. SFS Canada, at SFS Canada. Save Free Speech, SFS Canada, on x.com/SFS Canada. Become a follower, retweet our stuff, like our stuff, and yeah, but where were we? All right, 1 second. How do I get to my bookmarks? There we go. Here we go. So let's begin here. So once again, this is CIJA. This is the video we're about to watch. The Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs is the advocacy agent of Jewish Federations of Canada, UIA, representing Jewish federations across Canada. Tell your member of parliament to support Canada's Jews and Bill C-63. So supporting Bill C-63 is synonymous with supporting Jews, apparently, according to CIJA. This week, Minister of Justice Arif Virani tabled the long-awaited Bill C-63, the Online Harms Act. Given the dramatic rise in anti-Semitism, this legislation has come at a time when it is needed most by Canada's Jewish community. With this act, we have a chance to diminish Jew hatred online. You know, hey, they're looking out for their people, all right? And they're all over it. They're all over looking out for their people. They're on top of it. It sounds like they think this legislation is going to benefit them. It's going to stop anti-Semitism. And I think this is an interesting, we're going to watch this video for a couple reasons. Number one, I think they have intelligent people on here. Michael Geist is one of the people speaking, and he is a lawyer who has kind of been an expert in Bill C-11. He was really strongly opposing Bill C-11. Sounds like he has a soft spot for Bill C-63. Maybe it might be the fact that he's Jewish. I don't know. But regardless, he's a smart guy, so I want to hear what he has to say. And there's somebody else who's also very, I think they're like a liberal minister or something. But anyway, they're going to have, once again, they're going to have kind of like the strongest arguments in favor of Bill C-63, and we'll see kind of what their counter arguments are. And yeah, the other kind of thing worth mentioning, you know, this topic gets kind of really uncomfortable really quickly, but I've mentioned in past streams that, you know, someone who's supporting Bill C-63 is the Canadian Race Relations Foundation, and they kind of make this victim porn, and they basically say, hey, this Asian woman got death threats on the internet. She's crying, therefore we're going to end free speech. You know, they kind of use these fragile people who can't read internet comments without breaking down, and they use that as sort of like victim porn to try and justify censoring people online, trying to insulate all Canadian citizens from any harm or wrongdoing. And the reason why I think it might be interesting to see what CIJA is saying about this is, you know, one could make the argument that, you know, Jews are kind of, they play the victim game. You know, they are very much like, hey, look what happened to us, blah, blah, blah. And yeah, I think that's relevant because to pass through this bill, this tyrannical bill, Bill C-63, they are going to be using that victim narrative, not just this Jewish group, but like in general. They're going to be like, what about these victims? What about these victims? So, you know, let's talk to the experts. Let's talk to CIJA, the experts in being victims. You know what I'm saying? So, where's the video here? All right. Alrighty then. Okay. Here we go. So what's fact and what's fiction? Or maybe we'll start with this. This is from the CIJA website, linking to this video. What's fact and what's fiction? The new online harms bill. This is from April. There have been a lot of questions around the new online harms bill. In fact, it has been one of our most asked about topics since the legislation was tabled. That's why we sought the most knowledgeable experts about the bill that aims to do and not what the bill aims to do and not do. We hosted a special briefing with Dr. Michael Geist and Dr. Emily Laidlaw. They took us through how they see the bill, its intentions, and the pros and cons of how it will help fight online hate. Dr. Michael Geist is a, you know what? We might just watch this in the thing. Let's just get started. It is long, so I'm going to be kind of jumping through.
Richard is the General Counsel and Vice President of CIJA, and together with several of our professional staff has worked extremely hard on this file. Richard is also a former member of Parliament. He is a lawyer, a published author, a human rights activist, and a person who is passionate about the Jewish story. He understands both the pros and the cons of this legislation, and he brings in today two panelists that have been heavily involved in this legislation and present both sides of this debate. So, Richard, I will let you take over from here, and thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, Gail, and thank you everybody for being here. It's a pleasure to be moderating this panel. As Gail said, we know there's a lot of questions and comments.
Moderating this battle? Is that what he said?
Everybody for being here. It's a pleasure to be moderating this panel.
Oh, panel.
As Gail said, we know there's a lot of questions and comments within our community, and we will tackle them head on. A couple of things that I want to flag at the beginning in order to be fully transparent. Given the level of anti-Semitism online, something that affects all of us, but especially our children who spend so much time online, CIJA has long been advocating that something had to be done to combat online hate. And the level of anti-Semitism, both online and offline, now are at an all-time high. And the numbers of emails and calls that we get daily to ask for help about anti-Semitism is off the charts. So not to mince words, there is a crisis of anti-Semitism in this country. So today...
All right, I just kind of want to juxtapose that with the fact that over 100 churches have burnt down in Canada over the past couple years. Is there a Christian, an anti-Christ, anti-Christian hotline where all of these complaints are being collected? And is there a Christian advocacy group like CIJA for Christians in Canada? I'm assuming the answer is no, but this is kind of an issue, right? Or at least like you kind of have to admire the fact that they're on top of it. They're like, hey, they're very sensitive. They're like, hey, anti-Semitism is at an all-time high. We have to do something about this. Like all these disconnected Christians across the countries whose literal churches are being burnt down. Where do they go? Where do they go when their church gets burnt down? Who are they complaining to? Who's hearing their complaints? Are they calling anybody? And then what's the fallout of that? I was talking on a podcast earlier with Mark Peralvis earlier today, and I brought up tribalism, and I brought up the fact like, hey, I've heard younger people in politics say that tribalism is inevitable, and I gotta say, I was in denial of that for some time back in like 2019 when I was still like a naive libertarian. But now when you see the Khalistanis fighting with the Indians in the street, you see the Palestinians fighting with the Israelis in the street, you see the Ukrainians fighting with the Russians in the street. It seems to be like this is kind of everywhere now. And when it comes to a, white Canadian Christian, old stock Canadian, where is our tribe? Where is our representation? Like who is actually advocating for us? And the answer is we've been so indoctrinated that we've been convinced that we don't have a tribe. And if we do try to tribe together, that we are the worst people possible, right? I'm sure a lot of people watching already understand this, but that's the fact of the matter. Everyone in their every other group that is non-white is totally allowed to create a community, create a tribe, and be represented. But if you're a white Canadian, we can tear down your statues. We can shit on your history. We can spit on you. We can say you're inherently racist in schools with critical race theory. We can do whatever we want. And, there is no helpline. But, if you're Jewish, you have CIJA. You have a whole network of support that's going to be advocating for you. So, there's a lot of work to do in this country as tribalism is on the rise, especially when you're in a multicultural, a sort of like borderless, boundaryless, ruthless, multicultural society. what do you know? It's almost like it was inevitable.
Today, our aim is to cut through the noise, so to speak, and to give you upfront answers about the online harms bill, what it does and what it does not do. And in order to do this, we have two great panelists. Michael Geist is a law professor at the University of Ottawa, where he holds the Canada Research Chair in Internet and E-commerce Law and is a member of the Centre for Law, Technology and Society. He has obtained a Bachelor of Laws from Osgoode Hall Law School in Toronto, a Master's of Laws degrees from Cambridge University in the UK and Columbia Law School in New York, and he has a PhD from Columbia Law School. Dr. Geist serves on many boards, including the Internet Archive Canada and the Electronic Frontier Foundation Advisory Board. Bringing another perspective is Dr. Emily Laidlaw. Emily is a Canada Research Chair in Cybersecurity Law and Associate Professor at the Faculty of Law at the University of Calgary. She's a Senior Fellow at the Centre for International Governance, Innovation, and Network Director of the Canadian Network on Information and Security. Emily researches in the areas of technology regulation and human rights, with focuses on platform regulation, online harms, privacy, freedom of expression, and corporate governance. She actively contributes to law reform and advisory work with recent projects on online harms, mis- and disinformation, defamation law, and intimate image abuse. She co-chaired the expert group that advised the federal government on development of the online harms bill.
Okay, so this is somebody who advised in developing this specific legislation. Good. So Laidlaw is her name. I'm going to look her up on.
So thank you both for being here. As for the format, I will ask each of our panelists to give us their own overview of the bill for about 5 to 7 minutes. Then I will put questions to the panelists. Most of the questions actually.
All right. Right away. We got pronouns in bio with Emily Laidlaw. Canada Research Chair in Cybersecurity Law and Associate Professor of Law at University of Calgary. Love all things about tech, regulation, and human rights. Yeah? Okay. We'll see about that. Hey, I helped develop the Online Harms Act. I care about human rights. Okay, we'll keep that in mind. Let's see.
Come from you. Either where you wrote us, you commented on social media. Sometimes it was due to interactions. I know that at Kiddish, at Shul, after services, oftentimes I've been approached to talk about this bill. But just know that there's also a possibility for you to answer questions as we go through the process. There's a Q&A button at the bottom. Feel free to write questions that you would like me to pose the panelists, and I will do my best to get to all of them. It's a vast subject. We have an hour, but we will do our best. So to start with, I will pass the baton to Michael to give us an overview of the bill and where you stand on it. Michael.
Okay, great. Well, thanks, Richard, and thank you to CIJA for the invitation to participate. I actually think Emily and I have far more similarities than differences, I think, on this bill. So I think this will be an opportunity to really try to educate about what the Online Harms Act, or Bill C-63, does. I thought it's good to start to make sure that everybody's operating with the same baseline of knowledge. And the breakdown of this bill would start by recognizing that this is the result of several years of work. You mentioned that the community and many communities have been looking for this. Back in 2021, the government was about to introduce legislation. It held off after there was controversy associated with some other internet-related bills. It launched a consultation that summer. It was the same time as that 2021 election. And when many groups, many of the groups actually, and experts, and many of the groups that, quite frankly, were expected to support this legislation, criticized what the government had in mind, they decided to go back to the drawing board. And that included creating a new expert panel that Emily was co-chair of. There were additional consultations and roundtables. And I think, to the government's credit, on much of this bill, they took that expert advice seriously.
Oh, crap.
The regulatory.
I was just going to say, I'm interested to see Michael go more in depth here, but my interpretation of what he just said is, well, the government presented something that was all about online hate speech and hate propaganda, and that sort of triggered a strong response, an easy sort of attack on the bill of this is clearly going to take away people's freedom of speech. So they went back to the drawing board, and now they're presenting it as the Online Harms Act that's going to protect kids online. So they didn't go back to the drawing board because they disagreed with the sort of tyrannical intentions of the bill. No, they went back to the drawing board because they're like, there's no way we can sell this to the Canadian public. You need a much better Trojan horse for this. And now they're back with Bill C-63, all about protecting kids online. But anyway, let's continue here.
Creating a new expert panel that Emily was co-chair of. There were additional consultations and roundtables. And I think, to the government's credit, on much of this bill, they took that expert advice seriously. And so we have now Bill C-63, or this Online Harms Act. I think it's best understood as at least two bills in one. There is an online harms piece that is involved regulating large internet platforms, what their responsibilities and potential liabilities might be for things that take place on their platforms. And then there is
I'm going to be pausing this a lot probably, but once again, big tech platforms already do a pretty intense job of regulating their content. Michael Geist knows this as someone who is somewhat of an expert on Bill C-11. So I'm sure he knows that. But anyway, let's keep going.
In a sense, almost the second bill that includes changes to both the Criminal Code and the Canada Human Rights Act that is focused on hate and more particularly on individuals, not on the platforms. The online harms piece, the platform piece, is really the main part of the legislation.
I'm going to rewind that a tiny bit.
The liabilities might be for things that take place on their platforms. And then there is, in a sense, almost the second bill that includes changes to both the Criminal Code and the Canada Human Rights Act that is focused on hate and more particularly on individuals, not on the platforms.
Hate on individuals, not on the platforms. So that has entirely nothing to do with protecting kids online and everything to do with targeting dissidents, targeting people who are saying hateful things.
The online harms piece, the platform piece, is really the main part of the legislation. It focuses on social media services, and it targets 7 harms in particular: sexually victimizing children, bullying, inducing a child to harm themselves, extremism or terrorism, inciting violence, fomenting hatred, and intimate content that is sent without consent, often referred to as revenge porn.
So I think one of the biggest, I'm just realizing now, I think one of the biggest vectors of attack of this bill is going to be bullying, believe it or not. Because bullying, although it may have a negative connotation for some people who are sensitive to that, it's also the flimsiest sort of, so you're going to stop bullying on the internet. Really? Who's going to define what bullying is? Like that's crazy. It's such a crazy premise that you're going to stop bullying. You're going to stop bullying on the internet. Is that right? Like that just sounds so absurd. To stop all bullying. Can we make a meme about this? Can we make a meme about that? No, that's bullying. Says who? Says the government. Says the person complaining online. Like what a mess. What a mess that these people have the audacity to say that we're going to control the internet to the extent that we are going to stop bullying. Crazy.
Those are the harms. There are also, for these platforms that are really subject to this, subject to 3 duties. There's a duty to act responsibly that'll.
I hate this so much because I've listened to this stuff in various forms already, but like, hey, here's our grocery list of things that we're going to stop. We're going to stop this and bullying and this. And then there's like, these are the 3 things that big tech needs to do. They need to act responsibly. They need to act responsibly. Like, is that really in the legislation? To act responsibly? It's such like just gobbledygook to try and pass nonsense, obviously. Hey, we're going to pass a really serious legislation. What do we want these big tech platforms to do? Act responsibly. Yeah, we're the Canadian government. We want big tech to act responsibly. What does that even mean?
I'll come to in just a moment. There's a duty to protect children, which is largely focused on how they design their platforms to better protect kids.
Like once again, Michael Geist, it's crazy that we'll see if he mentions it, but like, do you not think, I'm hoping he'll mention this. You know what? I'm going to stop talking because there's a lot more to get into. Maybe he will mention it. This is just the introductory statement, but I was just going to say there's already a lot of things that big tech does to try and protect kids. So, they talk about, we need a better way to report things on social media. There's literally a report button everywhere on big tech. I can do it right here. Look, I could report this video. It's everywhere. On any big tech platform, there's a report button. But anyway, let's keep going.
And there is a requirement to make certain content inaccessible, essentially to block content, really only 2 kinds of content, revenge porn and child endangerment. The duty to act responsibly for these platforms is really the core element of this legislation with platforms. It would include things like ensuring that you've got the ability for users to flag content that may violate.
You can already do that. You can already flag content. They all have a flag button.
Violate the law, the ability to block other users. So if you're on a social media.
The block button. Canadian government literally is like, hey, can you guys make a block button? Oh, you already have that? Yeah, you guys are writing legislation for the internet and you're suggesting a block button. Tell me you know nothing about the internet without telling me you know nothing about the internet.
Site and you're being harassed, you have the ability to block them, and a requirement to create a digital safety plan where you identify how you're going to deal with this, be far more transparent about how you deal with these kinds of harms.
Big tech big tech already probably behind closed doors hates these different Western countries coming up with all of this nonsense. Hey, can you make a report about what your digital safety plan is? So now either Meta and Google has to play ball and come up with all of these like reports for the Canadian government, or more likely they might just say, F you, we're not even going to operate in Canada anymore. And you may think that's ridiculous, but of course, Bill C-18, the Online News Act, you already can't get news on Meta platforms, Instagram and Facebook. Anyway.
All of this is overseen by a new digital safety commissioner, and there's also the creation of an ombuds person that will assist, and Emily may get into that. Excuse me. Now, the second part of the bill involves several changes to the criminal code, including the prospect of a new offense where another offense is motivated by hatred, and that carries penalties that could go as high as life in prison. It's been pretty controversial, and I'm sure we'll come to it. There's also a new provision involving genocide or promoting genocide, which also carries life in prison, and the creation of a new peace bond, essentially a prior restraint, the ability to have some prior restraint in and around some of these issues. There is also within the Canada Human Rights.
Oof. Come on, Michael Geist. Are you going to be honest about the pre-crime stuff? Come on, bro.
Act, the return of Section 13 that many here may be familiar with. It was quite controversial. Somewhat. It was in the law, then it was removed. It's back again, and it creates a provision dealing with the communication of hate speech and the prospect of complaints to the Human Rights Commission and then potentially later to the tribunal, which would create actual real liability to the victim and potentially to the government as well. So that's the core of the legislation very quickly. If I might, just for a couple of minutes, provide you with a quick assessment of sort of the good and the bad.
Right,
on the good side, I think there were many that breathed a sigh of relief that what the government had initially in mind, much of that was tossed to the side, and instead.
I don't even know if that's necessarily true, because I feel like a lot of the stuff in the previous legislation is still here. It's just coded slightly differently. So I'll have to fact check Michael on that, because I feel like a lot of the stuff in Bill C-36 is still in Bill C-63. So I don't really know what he's talking about there.
Instead, really did listen to the experts, particularly around the issue of online harms. And I think some of the approaches that they've taken really are quite sensible. We can debate some of us around the edges, but it's a pretty good starting point.
Do you really believe that, Michael? You're the guy that opposed Bill C-11. This guy opposed Bill C-11, man. And Bill C-11 was, not so much about speech, but about like basically giving the keys to the algorithm on big tech algorithms to the government. And he was talking about how silly this is and getting into the minutia of how silly this is. And now he's kind of saying, hey, you know what? They turned Bill C-63 around. I think there's a lot of really good things in here. Do you? Are you sure about that?
Sigh of relief that what the government had initially in mind.
Look how erratic this man is right now.
Much of that was tossed to the side, and instead really did listen to the experts, particularly around the issue of online harms. And I think some of the approaches that they've taken really are quite sensible. We can debate some of us around the edges, but it's a pretty good starting point.
Debate around the edges. You're a lawyer. Should there not be zero debate around the edges if it's good legislation, right? Like just as a base point, Mr. Geist, Dr. Geist, I don't know. Like should there not be a sort of like no debate? Well, anyway, we'll see how the debate goes, but it doesn't seem like he's really opposing the free speech concerns like at all, which is really concerning. I feel like I kind of saw this coming because, I was a big fan of Michael Geist. I like his work. I still look at his work, of what he talks about when it comes to this bill. But when Bill C-63 came out, I saw him kind of passively. He's like, there might be some problems, but I guess I support it. And it's like, oh boy, I was hoping he'd be more of a champion to oppose this just on the principle of I don't know, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, the potential way that this bill could be weaponized for political reasons, the fact that there's a lot of evidence that laws have already been weaponized for political reasons against political dissidents. Anyway.
Where there are concerns, I think that, frankly, the duty to act responsibly is a little bit both a feature and a bug. We know the broad brushstrokes of what that might include for a platform, but there's a lot of uncertainty still. So it's easy to like it when we don't know the specifics. Perhaps when we get to the specifics, there may be some concerns. I think the oversight mechanisms definitely are a cause for some concern. There is this new digital safety commissioner. I believe there's a lack of oversight, a real lack of specifics, especially with what are truly quite enormous powers that are vested in the digital safety commissioner. And I believe trust in this legislation is going to depend in large measure on trust in how it's enforced with the digital safety commissioner. The other major concern, quite frankly, has...
Okay, timestamp. This is a good clip. I'm an expert. I'm Michael Geist, and a lot of this really depends on how much we can trust these people, because we're giving them a lot of power. And if they're ideologically biased, that would probably be a big problem. That's based translation. That's what he's saying. Hold on.
Has been the criminal code provisions. I think the notion of life in prison, where any violation is motivated by hate, by hatred, the idea that could include life has some pretty significant implications, and I find it really difficult to justify.
Okay, good. Shout out to Michael Geist. You know, we got to give him credit when he's saying the right stuff. I have concerns too, Michael. Totally agree. I probably would have worded it a bit stronger and said this has tyrannical implications. Just look at what happened during the trucker convoy. But hey, I'll give you credit for saying that.
Motivated by hate, by hatred, the idea that could include life has some pretty significant implications, and I find it really difficult to justify. So that's some of my perspectives in a nutshell, but I know we'll have the chance to expand on this and many other issues during the Q&A.
Thank you, Michael. That's a great way, I think, to set the table.
So just so you know, like, they're about to have a debate here, and Michael's our guy. He's the best sort of to fight against this bill, and it's kind of concerning because it was mostly glowing. It was a mostly very sort of glowing review of the bill. Like, he only seemed to have like one concern of, okay, there might be some, I don't know if I can justify the life in prison for speech was his one concern. And like, not a very strong concern. It wasn't very strongly worded. That being said, you are dealing with a Zoom call full of Jewish people post October 7th. So I guess if you don't, strongly want to throw everyone in jail who even, well, I think it's kind of self-explanatory. They want to call from the river to the sea as genocide. Anybody who opposes the state of Israel is genocide, blah, 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 blah. Very sensitive topic, obviously. But, yeah, so it was, I'm concerned about the bias that people might have and the power that the people might have on the Digital Safety Commission. And then, I don't know if throwing people in jail for life imprisonment for speech is necessarily justified. That's as strong as we got in this Zoom call. But maybe he'll have some stronger points later on. Let's see what the opposition says.
And by having this overview of the bill, Emily, if you could share your perspective for a few minutes, please.
Yeah, thank you, Richard, and thank you, Michael, for the great overview. And I think that we do have many shared concerns, and I'm sure that I think we should just sit down and solve the tweaks that need to be made to this legislation. So I thought I'd comment.
That's actually kind of a gotcha right there. Ma'am, respectfully, you helped craft this legislation, and you're already saying, yeah, maybe we should be able to just tweak it right now. Shouldn't this bill be perfect if you helped create it? You helped craft this legislation the way it is, and you're already like, yeah, maybe we should tweak it. Yeah, maybe it's, maybe I'm trying to justify tyranny, and maybe the way it's framed right now is a little kind of, kind of makes it obvious. Hey, let's put a little thing in there where we can kind of copy and paste a charge to throw somebody in jail if we call it a hate charge. So basically, we could just kind of throw anyone in jail for life if we don't like them, if the government doesn't like. Yeah. All right, she's a little nervous. Not coming out strong. This is you helped craft this legislation, Emily. She laid the law down. And she's already like, hey, yeah, maybe we should tweak it. Yeah, maybe we should throw it out, actually. Hi. I think we should throw it out because you guys are bringing up so many massive loopholes here, and you can't even seriously talk about this bill without being both of you kind of fidgety. So
complement this too by talking about how this would work from a victim-centered perspective.
What? How this would work from a victim-centered perspective. So you know how we know the term like climate change and being not just being like anti-racist, like not just being not racist, but being anti-racist. These terms didn't just fall out of the sky. These terms were workshopped by people. They were workshopped by liberal ministers and other people in academia to try and push forth, what's the word? Total nonsense bullshit that sounds all nice and fluffy and progressive. And this victim-centered perspective, oh my God. Because you got to understand, guys, if this bill passes, which it will not, but if miraculously I get hit by a bus and this bill passes, that's going to be like a term probably used like 5 years down the line. Well, in a victim-centered perspective, this is called the genocide. See how this person said, hey, I don't like your politics. I'm going to work out at the gym. That's actually called the genocide. And if you take the victim-centered perspective, then we need to throw this person in jail forever. Because the feelings of the victim really should determine whether or not someone should be locked up and have any freedoms or not. Let's listen to the emotions and thoughts of the mentally ill victim who is super neurotic and, as I mentioned, mentally ill. Let's listen to the victim and let's see what you think this person should be thrown in jail indefinitely. Okay, let's listen to the mentally ill victim here in this situation. Let's listen to the victim of bullying who is going to cry every time that they open Twitter. That's who we should listen to see if people should have rights or not.
So let's say...
Sorry, I got to timestamp that. Victim-centered. Let's take a victim-centered perspective. Oh my God. Oh my God. I just wanted to take a victim-centered perspective on this real quick, guys. That's so crazy. Do you think the 3 young girls who got murdered in the UK by a knife attack, should we take the victim-centered perspective on that? Well, they're dead. Actually, they got murdered. They got killed by the same guy, descendant of, I believe, migrants from Africa or something. Can we take so what are the parents? Have we heard from the parents of the 3 white kids who have been murdered? Can we take a victim-centered perspective on that? Oh no, that's right. We're going to throw violent criminals out of jail into the street so we can get the people complaining about it into a jail cell. I would actually like to know that. Where are the parents of the victims in the UK of the Southport murders of those young girls? I would like to hear what they have to say. Anyway,
something awful is happening online, and we'll deal with the real world anti-Semitism that we've been seeing flowing online. What is available to an individual?
So that's oh man, they're so good at this. I mentioned this when we went over the Arif Virani press conference, but they do this thing where they go, let's say something's happening online and there's also like real world things that happen. And like, really, there's no difference between what happens online, like a comment online, and what's happening in real life. Like they totally conflate the real world with comments online as if they're synonymous.
How this would work from a victim-centered perspective. So let's say, something, awful is happening online, and we'll, deal with the real world anti-Semitism that we've been seeing flowing online. What is available to an individual? Now,
what I love about that is that it's like, has a crime been committed? What's the crime? This is what's so funny about these people who justify online harms. Like, the line of like, what is a violent crime becomes irrelevant to them, because they're trying to move the line to be like, oh, okay, no. Now speech is violence. Now your opinion is violence. Like, that's really what this game is here. If you kind of boil it down, what this game is in passing Bill C-63 is to move the line of what is criminal to include speech, to include certain political opinions that you don't like. That's what it boils down to. And what they're going to do, I'm guessing, just off the top of my head, is they're going to try everything they can to do the guilt by association game and be like, you see this violence that happened? That speech is basically the same thing as that. Well, is there any sort of evidence proving that the person who said this is actually violent? Or are you just kind of extrapolating an internet comment to make it now a violent crime, or now crime all of a sudden? Like, that's what their game is. And to be, I mean, let's look, they're not going to make it, guys. Like, I'm sorry, Emily, you're working way too hard trying to tie these things together. I do not think you're not going to make it. Good luck. Good luck. But I don't think you're going to be able to tie these dots together with legislation. She's been working around the clock, and this is the best she's got. Victim-centered perspective. Good luck.
When Michael set out how there's three different, there's almost 2 or 3 different bills within one. There's good and bad about that we can debate. From a victim perspective, when something bad happens, you could say, well, what are the responsibilities of the social media company? And that would be...
I love how she's not defining what something bad is. She said, when something bad happens, when there's a mean tweet. Is that what you mean? When someone says a mean tweet, when something bad happens. Mean tweets. Have you seen the comment section? That's another thing. I bet the people who make this legislation like don't have a platform where they post content regularly. It would be such a joke for any even like micro influencer like myself, or especially like a larger influencer, to say like, yeah, hey guys, we got to stop hate online. Any big platform would be like, what do you mean? Hate is everywhere online. It doesn't matter. Like, all sorts of people get hate constantly on the internet. It's so synonymous with the internet. Maybe that's a really good argument, actually. Like, can you even have the internet without hate? That's one of the best parts of the internet. You hating people, people hating you. It being of much lower consequence because it is the internet. That's kind of one of the joys, I would argue, is that you can kind of vent your anger in a safe place. Hello? It's like when something bad happens, when someone gets angry on the internet. No, when someone actually gets angry about a very specific political agenda that is against our agenda. That's what I mean. It's so hard to separate this stuff from the political agenda and the tyrannical intention. That being said, the people in this meeting, I think they're genuinely they could be genuinely afraid of anti-Semitism and genuinely afraid that, like, oh my God, like, we need to do something. So it's not necessarily. I just want to kind of give some sympathy, because there are the people like Arif Farani and the crooks in Parliament who are definitely like, Evan Balgord and people with the anti-hate network. They are definitely like have a very tyrannical intention of like censoring certain people, and that's their goal. But along with that is they bring along the victims, they bring along the people, and they feed them this story of like, no, like we're going to save the world by censoring people we don't like. No, but we're going to save the world from the hate, and we're actually going to stop the hate and the bullying. And there's a lot of people who go, oh, okay, I believe you. Okay, yeah, that's what we're going to do. And they're, they think they're doing the right thing. But they're not. They're being manipulated by psychopaths and tyrants, unfortunately. Anyway, let's continue.
Be the Online Harms Act that they're looking to create with the Digital Safety Commission, or has a crime been committed and you want to go to law enforcement, or are you looking at something else where, that isn't at the level of criminal enforcement, but some sort of accountability for the individual, which is when you can make a complaint to the Human Rights Commission. But for hate speech, or advocating genocide, if the goal is to impose responsibility on social media services, to put into place some sort of mechanisms to mitigate risk, an individual can go and make a submission to this new Digital Safety Commission. There is no, the commission doesn't then investigate that. It's not a complaint to the commission. Basically, it receives that information, and then it becomes part of the information that it might share publicly about social media, or it might be the basis then that the Digital Safety Commission might launch a hearing, essentially like an investigation, but different, where it's investigating.
Wait a minute. It's like an investigation.
Something else where, that isn't at the level of criminal enforcement, but some sort of accountability for the individual, which is when you can make a complaint to the Human Rights Commission. But for hate speech, or advocating genocide, if the goal is to impose responsibility on social media services, to put into place some sort of mechanisms to mitigate risk, an individual can go and make a submission to this new Digital Safety Commission. There is no, the commission doesn't then investigate that. It's not a complaint.
Okay, so they don't investigate that.
It receives that information, and then it becomes part of the information that it might share publicly about social media, or it might be the basis then that the Digital Safety Commission might launch a hearing, essentially like an investigation, but different, where it's...
So it's not an investigation, but it also is an investigation. Ah, come on, Emily. I don't know if she's going to make it, guys. I don't know if she's going to make it here.
Investigating not your individual piece of content, but more broadly, say, if a social media service is complying with, what Michael talked about, is that duty to act responsibly. And that duty involves taking adequate measures to mitigate the risks of exposure to the harmful content, to exposure to, say, hate speech, to content that advocates genocide. The individual can go to this ombudsperson. I think this is really important. It is there to provide victim support, to say...
Victim support. Got victim support. Yeah, I mean, it's we've already seen the trend with progressive politics to empower victims and to make people feel special for being a victim, and they're going to salivate at this legislation. Oh my God, I can arrest people online? I can be financially incentivized to arrest people online because I'm going to play up the fact that I'm a victim? This would be a nightmare. This would be a nightmare.
Look, this was happened. These are your options. This is how you can navigate it. The ombudsperson would be able to pass on information to that commission. Also, the Digital Safety Commission, a major part of their mandate is education and research supported by a digital safety office. So part of this is taking the data that they get from these companies and saying, okay, where do we go from here? What do we know about the landscape of what's going on? What are the next steps more broadly about supporting Canadians in addressing these types of harmful content?
This is so interesting because it's okay, we want to get a bunch of data from big tech to see what is going on here. It's so what, you want to data scrape people who are saying the wrong things online for what? It's so unspecific. Other than we just want more control. We want to see what's going on. We want to we want to get our hand in the cookie jar there and just kind of know what's going on here. We want more power. We want more power is what we want.
But for individuals, for their individual piece of content, in the end, when it comes to social media services, you're looking at still going directly to the social media service. But it's a long-term project with the Digital Safety Commission. It's about harm reduction, and it's about setting minimum standards for these companies about how they manage these risks of harm.
Again, total bullshit that these companies don't have a minimum already.
you're looking at still going directly to the social media service. But it's a long-term project with the Digital Safety Commission. It's about harm reduction, and it's about setting minimum standards for these companies about how they manage these risks of harm. And so hopefully, I mean, if this is working at harm reduction, the goal would be that you're going to see better standardization about how this is managed by social media services.
Imagine being like an expert. What is she, an expert on what again? Is this her? She's an expert. Shit. She's like an expert on like cyberbullying and all this. But she's like, big tech needs to have a bare minimum on enforcing this stuff. Are you serious? Are you kidding me? You don't think that big tech has some sort of bare minimum to enforce harmful content? Like, what? It's so disingenuous. It's like these people are just completely ignorant and daft and incredibly stupid in terms of not knowing what big tech does. Or it's just straight up malicious. It's straight up malicious. It's straight up sort of I'm here to push the tyranny. We're here to get the power. We're here to get the money. Like, there's no in between. You're either incredibly stupid and naive and literally don't know anything about the so-called big tech companies you're trying to regulate, or you're literally an evil person who knows exactly what they're doing, and this is all just a show to get more power and control.
Go to law enforcement. I have many concerns about the criminal code provisions, like Michael, that we can dig into.
You wrote the legislation. Mrs. Laidlaw, Emily, you wrote the legislation. You have concerns. You have concerns? You wrote it. You wrote it. And you have concerns. Must be a real good piece of legislation. Good job, Arif Virani. Fantastic. The person who helped contribute to this also has concerns.
Or you can go to the Human Rights Commission. I think that reintroducing Section 13 was always going to be controversial. I think that some important steps have been taken to narrow the scope of it, a much clearer definition of hate, the ability to dismiss complaints, to be able to impose costs on parties that are frivolous and vexatious in the complaints that they make. I take seriously, though, Michael.
This is the more clear definition of hate right here, by the way. This chart. This chart is the more clear definition of hate. Dun, 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 dun. Is it detestation? Is it detestation? That is not allowed. Disdain? That's okay. Humiliates? That's okay. Dislikes? Okay. Offends? Okay. But no. Detests. And it's very clear. It's very clear what the difference between disdain and detests is. We're tyrannical government. You can trust us.
Has commented separately on a panel with me about the concerns of weaponization of that process. And what I have been trying to mull are what are ways that, that can be contained, because there's an important access to justice element to being able to go to the Human Rights Commission.
Important access to justice element being able to go to the Human Rights Commission. Why do I feel like what she's talking about is coming from a victim perspective? Justice to the victim, right? Justice to the mentally ill person who is terrified of internet comments. Their form of justice. Justice is now taking on a new definition here, according to the human rights person. They hurt my feelings and they're not in jail yet. I want justice. Unbelievable. All right, this video is really long, so we got to speed this up. I'm only 15 minutes in. It's an hour long.
The last point I'll make is about the regulatory structure of the Digital Safety Commission. I don't have the concerns that Michael has about the structure of the commission itself. I think that there is oversight through the ordinary processes through the federal court. We need a commission that has power, the power to investigate, the power to impose fines. There is an important duty on the Digital Safety Commission to take account of privacy, freedom of expression, and equality, among other things, in setting out any of the guidelines it writes or any regulations.
It's so funny. Like it's just double speak. It's all but like everything baked in here is so double speak. She says, we need the power So it's important we have the power. Also, we're concerned about freedom of expression.
Court. We need a commission that has the power to investigate, the power to impose fines. There is an important duty on the Digital Safety Commission to take account of privacy, freedom of expression, and equality, among other things.
Yeah, that's important too. Power to fine people, but we also need to be concerned about equality and the freedom of speech. I can just see Arif Farani being like, okay, make sure every time you talk about the power and the fines and throwing people in jail, make sure you always follow that up with a comment about how much you love freedom of speech. All right, honey? Good job. You're doing great, kid.
In setting out any of the guidelines it writes or any regulations. And much of this needs to be left to be developed later because of evolving tech and social media. You know, if you're...
Oh, really? That's a great caveat. Isn't that a great excuse to pass through shit legislation? Let's hear that again. I love that. I love beautiful bureaucratic excuses like this. This is just beautiful.
Privacy, freedom of expression, and equality, among other things, in setting out any of the guidelines it writes or any regulations. And much of this needs to be left to be developed later because of evolving tech and social media. You know, their powers are essentially to write regulations about risk management, digital safety, kids design, like what the obligations are to keep kids safe.
We just need to rush this legislation through and figure it out later, because the internet's always changing, you guys. Let's just make sure we have this huge bureaucratic body with a lot of power that can fine people, and we'll figure it out later, because kids' safety. You got to give them credit, because it's like these are their best talking points, I think. And I could see how this would like make sense to someone who's like, oh, okay, yeah, the internet, explained later. Yeah, okay. All right, let's just pass it through. Fair enough. All right.
And how to manage their complaints. So once I dug deeper, it doesn't seem as broad as it seems. It's very scoped to what it is, but certainly...
Bullshit. It really doesn't seem as broad as it is. That's crazy. That's such a crazy comment.
About risk management, digital safety, kids design, like what the obligations are to keep kids safe, and how to manage their complaints. So once I dug deeper, it doesn't seem as broad as it seems. It's very scoped to what it is, but certainly there is that uncertainty of saying we don't exactly know what the risk management plan will be for those particular companies. I think I'll leave it there, and we can dig into this with various questions and kind of we'll solve all of this, right, Michael?
I don't even know like what the takeaway was from her opening statement. She said herself that there's issues with it, even though she helped contribute to writing this legislation. I think if you wrote the legislation, you should be standing behind your work. But she's so insecure and unconfident in her work, maybe because she has a guilty conscience, that she's like, we do need to change things. The Digital Safety Board doesn't investigate. Fast forward 10 seconds. Well, it's basically an investigation. Okay. There's some double speak there. It's totally broad. It's not broad at the end, which is interesting. Poor Emily. I don't think she's going to make it. I don't think she's going to be able to push the line of what being criminal is into the realm of people speaking freely. She's not going to make it. But yeah, such boilerplate, someone said. Yeah, exactly. She loves the sound of her own voice and whiffs her own farts. Okay. Listen. Okay. Let's try and be respectful here. That's is that from something though? That's a really good. She loves the sound of her own voice and whiffs her own farts. That's like a classic like narcissism characterization. Alberta Clymer says, I'm guessing that she is either a lesbian or single, divorced, in brackets. Guys, you guys, keep them coming. She has a permanent skunt look on her face. I don't even know what that is. Okay, guys, let's stop the cyberbullying, okay? We don't want to be criminals now, do we? No, I'm kidding. I love cyberbullying. It's a lot of fun. It's what makes the internet fun, you guys. Then again, from a victim perspective, we're basically committing violence. That's basically we're terrorizing her emotional world we're terrorizing her emotional real world vis-a-vis its real world violence vis-a-vis human rights court says I need to wear an ankle bracelet for the rest of my life. Guys, there's no way we can let this pass, okay? If you guys are just tuning in, we are saving free speech in Canada. We're exposing the Online Harms Act, aka Bill C-63. If you want to support our work, go to givesendgo.com/savefreespeech. You can also check out SaveFreeSpeech.ca. We got a working website there. Lots to come. We already have some videos out there on our social media, but we are trying to stop Bill C-63. I'm just doing some of the research right now, hearing some of the strongest arguments in favor of Bill C-63, the Online Harms Act. It needs to be challenged. It needs to be challenged. We need to humiliate the people trying to push this. It would be the end of free speech. But yeah, check that out at givesendgo.com/savefreespeech. Oh my God, Scarecrow. Scarecrow with $50. Yes, thank you so much for donating, sir or ma'am. We don't stop this by giving in. Our only chance is to fight it. I'll take a slim chance over no chance. Yo! That's a bar. That is a bar right there. That is a bar. I'm definitely stealing that, Scarecrow. That is so good. I'll take a slim chance over no chance. Boom! Boom! Heck yeah. Shout outs to Scarecrow. 07s to Scarecrow in chat. That pumped me up. And you know, maybe it's silly, but I feel like little bumper stickers like that, little catchphrases like that, they're powerful. Okay? Hope is a very, very powerful thing. And this is a big part of the challenge. It's not just exposing Bill C-63. Okay? It's not just It's not just exposing Bill C-63 and the Online Harms Act and about how it's not about protecting children and it's really about tyranny, but it's about inspiring Canadians. It's about fighting demoralization, and it's about inspiring Canadians to say, hey, we can stop this. There is a slim chance, but it's a chance. Okay? We can make enough noise to do this. We have to try. We have to try. We have to. This is in America, it's the foundation of the country, of the Constitution, the First Amendment. That's the crazy thing, you know. If this was happening in America, there would be way more pushback on a crazy broad bill like this. And of course, they are trying to like weasel their way in America, but they're much more tactful in America because they know the stakes are higher. They know that patriots are out there. They're much more sensitive to tyranny. They're much more sensitive to this bullshit. Not here in Canada. We're too chill here. That's a problem. And unfortunately, the people who know what's going on are too demoralized. But little catchphrases like that, like I would take a slim chance over no chance, like let's do this. Let's freaking go. We need to politically activate people in this country, and I think we can do it. Yeah. And okay, just to address some people, hey, I'm getting banned in chat, blah, blah, blah. Listen, it's important that we represent Save Free Speech properly to reach as many people as possible. So don't take it personally. Oh, you're a hypocrite. You're banning people in chat. You're a free speech advocate. You're not letting me speak freely. Listen. Okay. We got to focus on the bigger picture here. We got to focus on doing damage in this what do you call it? Fifth generational warfare. Okay, we got to make striking blows here. And I love the chat. I love reading the chat. But, you know, a little comment on chat is not going to necessarily change the world here, especially if it's something that, no offense, one of my moderators deems is like not productive to the conversation. Okay, so don't take it personally. We're here to fry bigger fish, much bigger fish. Let's focus on the bigger fish, respectfully. Okay. Thank you again, Scarecrow, for the $50 donation. Really appreciate it. Let's put it on screen one more time. We don't stop this by giving in. So true. Our only chance is to fight it. I'll take a slim chance over no chance. Bars. Straight up bars from Scarecrow. Thank you again for the $50 donation. If you want to donate, hey, we cracked 3,900. Let's go. If you want to donate, go to givesendgo.com/savefreespeech. I do need to get a drink and go to the bathroom though, so we can push out and finish this finish this. We'll probably wrap this up within the next hour. But what should I put on screen for you guys while I go take a little quick break? Oh, you know what? I know what we'll bring up. You know what? I might be interviewing this gentleman.
Share.
Shoutouts to Wiretap Media. He posted this video today. CBC News axed my interview. This guy is exposing the car theft epidemic and the rise of crime in Canada. He's a car guy. Cool guy. Sounds like a great guy. If things go well, I'm going to be interviewing him on Thursday. So stay tuned for that on my Thursday stream. But let's take a look at this video here. I'm going to go get a drink. And yeah, shouts out to Wiretap Media for posting this. I'm going to hide myself for a second. And what am I going to do here? Come on. Let's make that a little bigger. All right, I'll be back in a sec. Whoops.
To Canadians. This is so clear to me because they came to interview me about the car theft situation that is happening across the country. They canned the interview. They did not release the interview because it did not fit the narrative that they were hoping to go ahead and spin to Canadians. You're going to ask me, well, what did you say, Sondra, in the interview? They asked me, what is the situation going on with car thefts? Here's the high level. And this, they canned the interview because of this. I told them, one, it's a failure of our government, our leadership team, the justice system that has allowed this to happen in the first place. Number one. Number two, we need to hold these leaders accountable because now Canadians feel like their communities are no longer safe. And there's stats to prove this. 50% year-over-year increase in car thefts in Ontario. 400% increase in home invasions in Ontario that lead to a car theft. I shared all of these stories and these stats with CBC, and they didn't want to go ahead and share this because this does not fit their narrative. I let them know, why are we not treating criminals in this country like criminals? People are terrorizing Canadians. Hundreds of you have sent me the stories of your families being traumatized, and I shared those stories with CBC. They didn't want to hear it. It doesn't fit the narrative. They don't want to hear the Canadian side of the story. They have their own specific side of the story that they want to share. This is such a big issue. Our newscasters in Canada are completely biased. And I can tell the person that was interviewing me did not like the answers I was giving, which was the truth. Why do we not have proper authentication in vehicles today? It's 2024. Why do we have all of this crime happening across the country? Because we don't hold these criminals accountable. The Toronto police chief just said, we are catching people and releasing them right away. Their entire police force feels disenfranchised because what are they doing? What are they doing? And then how are we shipping tens of thousands of cars across the port of Montreal? It's like we are blind. And I shared this common sense story that all of you are sharing with me, and they canned the interview. This is a message to all Canadians. Do not trust CBC News. They do not share both sides of the story. They just share the side of the story that benefits their benefactors. CBC News is all about spinning a narrative. They're not there to actually share the news.
Bars? Absolute bars by this man? Yeah, I'm excited to chat with this guy. I just made some commentary on the Save Free Speech page. Save Free Speech page. This is why it's relevant to the fight to save free speech. We hear some Canadians say, if my freedoms are being violated, I would hear about it on the news. No, you would not. CBC refuses to report on the violent crime and car theft epidemic happening in Canada. If our safety isn't their priority, then why would our freedoms be? We're passing Bill C-63. We're going to keep you safe. We're going to keep you safe. Safety is our priority. Yeah, I doubt that. You're not going to report on the rising crime happening in this country. It's absolutely insane.
CBC News does not.
And also to also echo that fact, where is it? Right here. Also from Wiretap Media, he posted 5 stories that didn't make Canadian media headlines. And I wanted to focus on this one. Canadian citizens were impacted by data security breach when 3 billion social security numbers were stolen from data centers and sold on the dark web. You think this is going to be mentioned in Bill C-63 to keep us safe online harms? How about my data being breached? by who God knows what kind of bad actors. What about that part of safety? Oh, you're just concerned about censoring dissidents, aren't you? Okay, great. Great. Fantastic. Fantastic. Yeah, shout outs to Wiretap Media. He's making some good edits. This is him on Twitter. All right, let's get back into reacting to the CIJA video about Bill C-63. Yeah, chocolate milk and cookies. No, this is my beverage of choice. It's the best. It's the best pop they got going. I'm going to say pop because it's very Canadian. I'm gonna take a quick break here and have a couple sips, couple sip breaks before we hop back into this reaction. Oh no, was there a Tim Horton commercial? Oh, bro, okay. I may have turned on monetization on this one. I apologize, but just so you know, it does help. If you sit through the ad, you're helping me out. You're helping me out, so you're helping me support myself so I can focus on saving free speech in Canada. So just know if you're watching some annoying ad that you're helping save free speech on my channel. But if you're watching an ad on some other video, no. But no, I know what that's like. You know, I actually, speaking of anger and hate, I'm watching the end of Game of Thrones right now, and I am so filled with rage because the person who operates the Crave account where I watch it, the streaming service on Crave, this is kind of a tangent, but they got the cheaper version of Crave, and now there's ads. There is 4 ads every 10 minutes of content. 4. So I'm watching like The Long Night, like one of the most epic Game of Thrones episodes there is. It's an hour and 20 minutes long. It's like this movie. And then like right at the most intense moments, it's like, you could save 15% or more. I'm like, oh my God, I forgot how painful this is. It's it's just pure, like when the ad starts, it's just pure rage. Pure rage. Where it's just like, I just really want to, like, I shouldn't say it, but like, I really just, like, I feel like snuffing the life out of something right now. You interrupted the most important part. I was there emotionally. I was suspending disbelief. I was in the world of Jon Snow and the Dragon Queen. And then it's like, you could save 50% or more on car insurance. It does make me a little grateful though of like how, because we used to have to watch ads all the time, right? Like I'm a millennial. I'm 35 now. And yeah, I grew up watching TV. Those ads, sometimes those ads were brutal. The difference is though, they designed TV to have an ad break and a natural break. They don't have that in like modern TV shows on Netflix and Crave and HBO and all this. There's no natural break for a commercial. So it's like right in the middle of some emotional beat, something so dramatic and hey, do you want to sign up to Audible? And on top of that, the audio isn't mixed properly. So you'll hear like an ad with like super loud music, super low music. It's unbelievable. Anyway, let's focus here. What are we doing? Guys, what are we doing? Focus. Come on. Derek Nelson, there's been at least a dozen ads on this live stream alone on iPhone. Oh, bro. When Greg inadvertently makes a commercial for piracy. Did I? Oh, yeah. Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah. You just pirate it, bro. Commercials ruin my life. Let's take a victim-centered perspective on this. I'm just trying to enjoy my Game of Thrones, and then I get violated by ads. Violated. Crave violates me with their advertising. Anyway, I'm going to arrest Crave for their hate speech, their online. Yeah, you know what? You want to talk about online harms? Let's talk about these ads on the Crave streaming service. Okay? I'm trying to enjoy my TV show, and then I'm attacked. My senses are raped, okay, by this ad, interrupting my TV show. I use this TV show for escapism. It's the one part of my day where I get to escape the stresses of being a victim to capitalism, of being a victim to the patriarchy, of white supremacy. I'm trying to watch my TV show, and then an ad comes up violating me. It's harmful. It's bullying. You know what it is? It's bullying. That's what it is. That's what it is. And that's why we need to pass Bill C-63, the Online Harms Act, so I can fine Crave for money. I want to fine them. I want to throw some of them in jail because I had a bad day today and I don't know how to deal with my emotions. So we need this bill so I can feel better about myself for punishing people who make me uncomfortable and make me have to self-reflect on the fact that I'm overweight and don't take care of myself and haven't dealt with my emotional problems. Oh, and we want to protect kids online too. That as well. Okay, yeah, thanks. Perfect. All right, let's get back into this. What's fact and what's fiction, the new online harms bill? All right, hopefully we speed this up a bit.
Take our best shot.
Yeah, thank you. So quick question, just so to help me understand like a very tactless, concrete thing. So I see something on Twitter that I think is very hateful. If this bill is in place, what do I do? What are the possibility, the options that as a Jewish person I can do?
You walk away from the computer. You can put your phone down. How hateful is it? How hateful is it? How do we like? First question would be, how do we determine? Is it ding, 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 where was the tweet? Ding, 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 ding. Disdains, but not detests. Sorry. Try again next time. Oh, but someone in the government, someone at the ombuds person said, actually, no, we can make the argument that that's detestation. Sure. Yeah. Let's find this motherfucker. Part of my language. So he poses the question. Good question. Hey, I find something hateful on Twitter. What do I do as a Jewish person?
Can one of you answer that? Yes, Emily.
Maybe I'll just jump in because that was a bit where I started, which is, well, the first step would be to complain to the social media platform. I think we're seeing, of course, on X that they're not taking very seriously any complaints about hate. The other option then is to submit.
Should we start counting? Should we start counting? Maybe we'll start counting. That might be fun. I should have started counting from the beginning, but let's see if this is worth it or just a big waste of time. Is there a way to make this? Okay. So this number is the number of times hate is mentioned without clarifying what hate is. So that's 1. Actually, no, it's 2 because it's 2 because he said the tweet and he didn't specify. All right.
That information to the Digital Safety Commission. They're not going to act on your complaint. That will be information that feeds whether they do a bigger investigation or a bigger hearing about the social media service. Or you can go to the ombudsperson who can't do anything exactly but provide support to help you figure out what to do. So that would be perhaps a first point of call as well, and they can help you navigate. And the last 2 options would be, if you think it's reached that threshold, go to the police or make a complaint to the Canadian Human Rights Commission.
Go to the police. Again, maybe if they had defined what the hate is, but this person, without even flinching, is saying you should maybe call the cops, actually. If you read the question was, what do you do when you read a hateful tweet? She says, maybe call the cops. Yeah, I might want to call the police if you read a hateful tweet. Without even clarifying anything about what the tweet might have said. Don't you think that's kind of an important thing to clarify? No, it was a hateful tweet. Call the police. Of course. That's what I'd do. This is insane. Please, Michael Geist, say something in response about defining hate. Please. I hope our man Michael Geist says something here.
Yeah, if I can for just a moment, pick up on that. I think that provides a really good review of the different options. I will say that the idea that this is suddenly going to result in when you face something online that it comes down or that you get justice is unlikely. It still will depend on, especially initially, some of the things social media companies do. I faced a lot of this sort of stuff, especially on Twitter on my own account when I post on anti-Semitism related concerns, and don't have really any expectation that the law would directly change that. But what
can we get some specificity of the anti-Semitism, of the hate? I feel like this is kind of important.
It will change, and I think this is a positive, is that the process around dealing with some of this content where there are complaints about the prospect sometimes of content coming down is oftentimes very opaque. On a less controversial site, I had content that was removed when I posted an anti-Semitic image trying to highlight the fact that this is what the community is facing day in, day out right now in Canada in 2024. It's really unthinkable and quite astonishing. I posted it on LinkedIn. That content came down. It was presumably an algorithm or AI of some sort that decided it came down because there wasn't the context. It went back up. It came back down again. Ultimately, there was some sort of review, but the entire process about how those decisions are made, something that we don't have much insight into. And what this legislation will do as part of a digital safety plan is not necessarily tell you what happened to your particular piece of content, but it will add, I think, far more transparency to a process that will require companies to disclose complaint data, information on how they respond to that data, and so that people may, in the individual case, be left unhappy or happy with what the resolution was. But at least we're going to have, I think, far better, more open information about what is actually taking place behind the curtain of many of these social media companies, which right now, very often you file a complaint and you have no real idea of what comes of it.
So what I'm hearing is instead of getting access to the algorithms of how they feed different Canadian citizens their information and algorithms on their feed, now they want access to how social media companies deal with censoring content or taking down content. They want to see what's inside of the big tech companies. They want more data. They want it to be more transparent. And I think the added piece that is not mentioned there is you want more bureaucracy involved in that. So I think it's interesting how he's like, hey, it's a messy process. I posted something that was anti-Semitic, but I wanted to highlight that it was anti-Semitic, and it got taken down. Then it got back up, and it was a whole mess. And it's like, okay, so adding Canadian bureaucracy to this is going to help how? The big tech platforms are already struggling with this. And you think adding the Canadian government is going to help deal with the, tricky nature of, moderating online content. If anything, it's going to be obviously more politically biased. That's all I can say. But it's once again, it's wanting power. It's wanting more power over how the social media algorithms work. I'm quite disappointed so far that Mr. Geist did not bring up hey, maybe we should define what hate is. He kind of just said, yeah, I got a lot of hateful comments too on my social media, but I don't think we're going to get any justice there. I hate to say it, but can they even make something like this? Can they make something like this? They don't even have anything like this to, classify what they're talking about. I mean, they've said it in words, but if they're not going to hone in closer, it's a tyrannical bill, so I really don't care for them to hone in closer because I know it's all nonsense, but it's silly that they're even talking about this with more of a kind of defined definition of what's going on here, of what the actual content is.
Okay, thank you. It's hard to have this conversation without taking the context into question, and we're seeing accusations that Israel is committing genocide, that if you're supporting Israel, you're supporting genocide, and
which is an argument that people are making, and there's validity to that argument. So, it gets so hairy so quickly, especially on the Palestine-Israel topic. Because, if you haven't seen, there are people on both sides saying, I want to kill that other side, all of them. There's Palestinians or Hamas supporters saying this, and there's Israelis saying this. they're both calling for genocide in one form or another. Both sides. Now, of course, we're watching CIJA, so it's mostly all Jewish people on this call, so obviously they're going to have a very, very strong bias. But anyway, it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see where they go with this.
Without taking the context into question, and we're seeing accusations that Israel is committing genocide, that if you're supporting Israel, you're supporting genocide, and there's concern out there that, and given also the context also that Jews are often portrayed as, at least by some people, as oppressors, both in Israel, because Israel is a powerhouse in the region, and in Canada, as being white, settler colonialists and all that stuff. And we've heard concerns that being a pro-Israel advocate, being a defender of Zionism, of the right of the Jewish people to self-determination, could land somebody into legal trouble with this legislation. And I was getting emails just before this panel started. So I really like to have your thoughts on this, because we're hearing it, and your opinion matters on this. So Emily, if I could start with you and then go to Michael.
This is a great, hey, bravo to the panel guy, because this is actually a really good question. Hey, everyone who is pro-Israel could technically be accused of supporting genocide. So how does that work with this legislation?
It's a really important question. And I would say that concern about what the threshold is for hatred is probably one of the key concerns about this legislation.
Again, key concern, you wrote the legislation. And you don't know, there's not a clear answer here, right? You wrote the legislation. There's no clear. It's almost like it's terribly written legislation that's incredibly broad, even though you said it wasn't broad earlier. But anyway.
So let me identify where I don't think there should be concern, and perhaps where there should be. The Supreme Court has set a very high threshold for what hate speech means. They
really have not. They've set a subjective one, but please continue.
And none of what you're talking about would be captured by that.
What? Are you going to say the magic word, vilification and detestation? If you're saying that, if you make the argument that Israel is committing genocide, or you say that they're villains for committing genocide, or you support Israel and say, hey, Palestinians are villainous, or Palestinians are detestable, or Hamas is detestable, that's the threshold. You've passed the threshold for this new Supreme Court definition of speech.
So hate speech is ultimately at that level where it's beyond even disdain, it's beyond offense, that you're essentially communicating statements that are predicated on the destruction of an entire group of people, and the threshold should be incredibly high.
So that's not even correct. That's not even correct. Let's look it up. Destruction of an entire group of people. Detestation and vilification are the words. The definition.
Detestation.
Detestation. Intense dislike. He is the detestation of the neighborhood. Woodworth, detestation of aristocracy. This is one of the words. This is one of the words that the Supreme Court has defined as criminal hate speech. What's the other one? Vilification. Vilification.
Vilification.
Abusively disparaging speech or writing. The widespread vilification of politicians. Yo, Google definitions are cooking right now. I'm loving this.
Vilification.
So destruction of an entire people is not part of vilification or detestation, which is the Supreme Court definition, broadened definition of criminal hate speech. So the woman who wrote this legislation or helped contribute to developing the legislation doesn't even know what she's talking about. She's not going to make it. Okay.
So hate speech is ultimately at that level where it's beyond even disdain, it's beyond offense, that you're essentially communicating statements that are predicated on the destruction of an entire group of people, and the threshold should be incredibly high. There's still a risk of a chilling effect because people are fearful of bad decisions by regulatory bodies, by companies, by law enforcement or Canadian Human Rights Commission about what that means, and being pulled into a process that they don't belong in.
Facts. Totally real. Totally true.
Right. I would say that when it comes to the idea of the regulator, like the Digital Safety Commission, ultimately they have oversight of social media about broadly how they're dealing with these issues. So it doesn't really come up there, right? Because
Emily, you said it wasn't broad. Broadly, we have ways to deal with it. That's such a non-answer. Broadly, we have a plan to deal with this. I'm not going to go into detail, but broadly, it's not broad, but broadly, yeah.
But what I would say is that there should be some sort of mandate about what the expertise is of those commissioners, in particular, very clear legal understanding about freedom of expression. I think that's key and that's core to that body.
Okay, great. So the legislation sucks. It's incomplete. And now we need a mandate on top of the legislation. Or is the mandate going to be added to the legislation? What's the mandate going to be? So many question marks here. You helped contribute to writing this legislation, yet you're saying, no, actually, you know what? We need a mandate as well.
When it comes to law enforcement, all they've done with the criminal code amendments has been to kind of embed in it the Supreme Court definition of hate.
All they've done? This is actually creepy because who was I talking to before? They did this. It was another lawyer, I think, and they hand waved away this thing. And they said, no, I know it's part of the Supreme Court. It's part of the Supreme Court, the definition of hate. And it's like, guys, this silly meme created by Lee Stewie, by the way, shout outs to Lee Stewie. This silly meme is literally the Supreme Court. This is the Supreme Court right here. This is the Supreme Court's like epic. As long as they don't hit the red, they won't get thrown in jail by the feds. Okay? Detests or vilifies. She didn't even bring up the magic words, by the way. She just said, "Oh no, this is totally handled. It's just the Supreme Court definition." I guess we never questioned the Supreme Court of Canada, I guess. That's a mistake.
Very clear legal understanding about freedom of expression. I think that's key and that's core to that body. When it comes to law enforcement, all they've done with the criminal code amendments has been to kind of embed in it the Supreme Court definition of hate. But I think that there's other problems with the criminal code provisions, which Michael and I can talk about. The Canadian Human Rights Commission, again, it's a high definition, but that's where I think the greater risk is. And I'm still I think that's where you're going to see that risk, right? And you're pulled into a process that you don't belong in because of different views of what hate means.
I feel like that's just such a huge lie to say that it's a high definition. It's a high threshold for hate. It's really not. Like it's such a circus. We're talking about genociding people, and they're like, it's a really high definition. It's like, wait, what? The accusation is that you're genociding people. Yeah, no, but it's a really high definition. Don't worry about it. Don't worry.
At least what's meaningful to people. That's where I go to the question of, I want to find a way to tighten it, to make it better. I think, Michael, you might be landing saying the risks are too high and we should get rid of it. I'm curious what you have.
So I'll get to Michael, but I just want to push you on this a bit, Emily. So when you say that the risks are higher at the human rights, in the human rights setting, is there anything, like, does the bill include, boundaries or ways to avoid frivolous people being looped in or brought into frivolous litigation? And if there is, are they strong enough, or should we be asking for those levies, for those protections to be higher? Please answer this, and then Michael, I'll
another good question from this guy.
Have you add a few words, please?
Well, so there's strong protections, and they might be sufficient. And it is that if it's evident that this isn't hate speech, then the commission can dismiss the complaint.
If there's evidence that this isn't hate speech, what the fuck does that mean? We're at 3 uses of the term hate without defining it.
If it's frivolous, they can impose costs. So it basically dissuades individuals from making a complaint that's specious, that's just made in bad faith. So there are things built into it. And they also narrow the definition of Section 13 compared to the old version.
So people might be getting excited at this of like, there's going to be consequences for people who wrongly accuse me of hate. I got a better idea. Let's just not pass the bill so we don't have to deal with people accusing us of hate speech. Crazy, I know. It's such a because here's the thing. The courts, the Digital Safety Commission will probably be slanted to the far left. So this idea of like, maybe we'll get a little cookie and people who wrongly accuse us of hate speech, we might be able to like find them. Can you imagine, like, the culture of Canada would be destroyed by this bill? It'll be a crazy tattletales. People telling on the teacher, telling on the principal, he called me this, he called me, well, no, I didn't call her that. No, she has to pay me money. Like it's I could see it just being a total nightmare, and it would just cause paranoia and social decay like never before seen.
So it is Supreme Court Canada jurisprudence. So it might take care of things.
It might. Once again, the person who contributed to this legislation not sounding too confident.
Concerns me, which is what Michael, I will say, is the one who's mentioned this to me, is the fact that there can still be coordinated campaigns of well-funded groups that might target individuals.
Okay, that's a bar. Okay, that's a bar. That's a bar. She actually had that's actually a bar. Emily's got some she's spitting actually. Yeah, I'm definitely concerned about that as well. Good point. Emily scoring some points here.
So it is Supreme Court Canada jurisprudence. So it might take care of things. What concerns me, which is what Michael, I will say, is the one who's mentioned this to me, is the fact that there can still be coordinated campaigns of well-funded groups that might target individuals. That needs to be solved somehow in the legislation. So I don't know if it is a fee. I don't know if it's some other metric to dismiss it. And I haven't solved that problem yet. I haven't figured out a way through that. It's what I'm wondering about.
It's what you're wondering about. Am I crazy? They said that she helped contribute to this legislation. Did they not? Am I crazy? She's got so many problems with this own bill that she contributed to. This is crazy. Oh my God.
Michael.
Yeah, sure. I'll pick up on a few things that Emily said, and we do agree on most. I first want to actually emphasize that there is already a chilling effect for anyone in our community, and frankly, in a number of communities that speak out on these issues. There is a chilling effect. The backlash that you invariably face causes, I think, many people to think twice about whether they want to step out and comment. No, and it's not just online. There's a chilling effect offline as well. So,
okay, so people already self-censor themselves. Interesting. They already self-censor themselves. There already is a chilling effect. Is that supposed to be like an encouragement to pass it? Like there wouldn't be more of a chilling effect?
These issues are very real, and many of them will not be solved by legislation, no matter what the legislation says.
Okay, that's a bar too. That's another bar. And that's really like, you know, the common sense sort of argument for a lot of this stuff is like, you really think we're going to be able to let all human beings get along and not offend each other? Are you crazy? The Online Harms Act. Imagine a classroom full of, it's a busy classroom. It's like, it's a packed classroom. It's like 35 kids, huge classroom. They're in grade 6. So they're at that age where they're kind of they're talking back. They're smart asses. Kids naturally group together and bully other kids. That's just what happened. Kids go into cliques, whatever. Maybe there's brown kids, white kids, black kids, Asian kids, you know. Do you think that all these kids are going to get along and that there's never going to be any bullying that happens and there's never going to be any disagreements that happen and none of the kids are going to be offended by any of the other kids ever? Of course not. That's absurd. The book, Lord of the Flies, kind of reflects this whole notion that, you know, our base instincts take over and it becomes tribal and it becomes ugly. Okay. And I'm not saying that we should like, keep it legal for what's his name again, the fat kid who gets killed by the Rock or whatever. I don't think that should be allowed. Anyway, this is the wrong tangent, but the point is like they're trying to legislate human behavior. They're trying to control human behavior and emotions, and it's very utopian. Of we're going to make sure that everyone gets along, and we're going to end hate forever. And the people watching know this. That's a tyrannical thing. You say you're going to help everybody, but you're actually just going to usurp more control, and people are going to hate each other. That's actually going to be the net result. Bullying is human nature. Exactly 420 all day. Bullying is precisely human nature, and this idea that we could legislate it away is insane. You could look at any group around the world, any human culture, anywhere, even if they live in the woods and they've never even discovered civilization. You bet your ass there's bullying. You bet your ass there's some sort of social hierarchy that naturally happens. People get offended. People's feelings get hurt. It's part of being human. It's part of being human. All right, let's keep going. Let's get through this, guys. Whew.
The core elements in terms of dealing with the platforms don't address individuals at all. So the idea that an individual will be liable under the elements of the law that seek to create a duty to act responsibly for the platforms, it doesn't really affect individuals in that way. It's about what the platforms do. The platforms might themselves adopt certain policies, but and perhaps encouraged to do so through the legislation. But no one's landing in jail. I don't think anyone's landing in jail for these kind of comments, period. But they certainly aren't affected in that way based on the social media side of it. The criminal code provisions do, as Emily notes, raise concerns, but I don't think that the kind of speech that you're talking about and comes anywhere near the sort of level that would lead to any sort of prosecution. It is, as Emily suggests, at the Human Rights Commission that under the Human Rights Act that I think there are real risks. And I genuinely fear, based on what we see, that this will cause a weaponization of complaints that will flow in all directions. And this notion that there is the ability to dismiss complaints, which there is, and so those powers are, I think, important. But I think the prospect that an individual faces even one of these complaints, never mind potentially hundreds, where there are organized campaigns to target certain people that speak actively on a part of a community and claiming what they are doing is engaged in hate, I think must surely have even more than a chilling effect. I think
another hate mention. Just gonna rewind it a tiny bit.
Are, I think, important, but I think the prospect that an individual faces even one of these complaints, never mind potentially hundreds, where there are organized campaigns to target certain people that speak actively on a part of a community and claiming what they are doing is engaged in hate, I think must surely have even more than a chilling effect. I think it creates real fear in individuals. I mean, it is not a comfortable thing. I've never received one, but I'm quite certain it is not a comfortable thing to be advised that there has been a complaint filed against you at the Human Rights Commission based on something that you said on social media. And so looking at this as a mechanism to address this issue, I think carries some great risk. And if it had a realistic prospect of significantly altering what, Richard, you started off by talking about, a community genuinely in fear and deeply concerned about the level of anti-Semitism that's being faced, if there was, I think, a realistic chance that this process would have a positive effect in trying to address those issues, then one might be able to conclude that even that weaponization might still be worth the risk. But I frankly don't see a lot of evidence to suggest that when you think about what's taking place, that those that engage in that weaponization are going to be particularly persuaded to stop based on almost anything. And so
this is so crazy, man. So Michael says it's a concern that this could definitely be weaponized by many groups. However, maybe weaponizing this could work. Weaponization of this legislation will be bad, but at the same time, we might be able to use this to our advantage to oppose the people we don't like. Am I reading that wrong, Michael? That's what it sounded like. Weaponization bad, but at the same time, maybe we can use this.
Certainly not when those complaints might be dismissed, which unless you start raising penalties for those kinds of complaints. But otherwise, I think that we would continue to see the kind of hate regardless of the availability of this remedy. And there are real risks, I think, to individuals who might find themselves targeted as a result of it.
Yeah, obviously there's a risk to the people who will be targeted because of this. I mean, I feel like he brushed over a couple things there that I think he You know, he kind of, again, waved away the whole, like, the new definition of criminal hate speech. No. People who support Israel won't get charged with criminal hate speech. It's detest. You don't think that there's any pro-Israel person who could be? How about Netanyahu? Should I look up a Netanyahu clip right now? There's got to be a Netanyahu clip. Let's see. Netanyahu. All right, here we go. I think this is what I'm looking for. Good old Netan. So would this qualify as criminal hate speech under the Supreme Court? Would this consider vilification or detestation?
In the Middle East, Iran's axis of terror confronts America, Israel, and our Arab friends. This is not a clash of civilizations. It's a clash between barbarism and civilization.
So that sounds like he's vilifying Iran to say we are civilized, they are barbarians. That kind of implies that they are the enemy, they are villains, and also Iran is an axis of terror. I think you could make the argument that that is vilifying Iran and vilifying the enemies of Israel. But for whatever reason, we're just hand waving away that no, the threshold is so high. The threshold's so high for the new hate speech definition. No, it's not. Detestation, intense dislike.
Detestation.
I think it's pretty clear to say that Netanyahu detests Iran and
Vilification.
They are an axis of terror. They are barbarians. I think it'd be pretty easy to make the argument that Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, is vilifying his enemies, which would be criminal hate speech under Bill C-63, according to the Supreme Court, which I totally disagree with. I don't know how that Supreme Court decision is. They're going to try to weasel this into the new definition of hate speech. But anyway, the fact that they're glossing over that is crazy to me.
So if I can, is it okay if I jump in with one short? Because why I land differently on this is that I don't view it as reducing hate access.
Should I keep counting or is this stupid? Let me know if I should keep counting. Maybe it's not that exciting, eh? It's just kind of interrupting the flow, isn't it?
To the Canadian Human Rights Commission. I view it as access to justice. And at the moment, and if it remains...
This is the victim-centered perspective. This isn't about stopping hate. This is about access to justice. What the fuck does that mean?
If I can, is it okay if I jump in with one short? Because why I land differently on this is that I don't view it as reducing hate access to the Canadian Human Rights Commission. I view it as access to justice. And at the moment, and if it remains unchanged, individuals, the only thing available to them is to go to law enforcement. Many groups don't feel comfortable with that. Law enforcement is overwhelmed. And yes, we need to take major steps to better resource, better train law enforcement to deal with this. But it's not always or never.
They still haven't defined hate. And they're still saying all they can do is go to law enforcement. Go to law enforcement for what? Like, does it reach the threshold of being against the law? No. Maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe there's a reason we've had that in place for so long in free Western countries.
Necessarily the appropriate solution. Many provincial human rights bodies don't, even though they have hate speech provisions, won't hear them if they're related to the internet. They see that as federal. And so it means that except for going to the police, there's nothing. There's absolutely nothing available for an individual.
That's not true. You could put your phone down, Emily. You could walk away from the computer. I know these are radical suggestions, but you could literally put your phone down. That might solve the problem of someone disagreeing with you or saying something hateful on the internet. Turning the internet off. Unplugging your Wi-Fi router. Maybe instead of calling the police, you should just unplug your Wi-Fi router.
individual who sees it as appropriate that they should access some sort of justice. And that's why I land that I don't have a solution to the weaponization yet. I just want to try to solve that one, because otherwise I do think that as reintroduced, it's important.
Doesn't have an answer to the weaponization. So yeah, we still got this kind of matzo ball hanging out here of just weaponizing weaponizing legislation, citizens weaponizing legislation against one another. Haven't solved that yet. I helped contribute it to the legislation, though.
It is, if I can quickly, and we'll turn it into true debate. I think you're right about that. There isn't that remedy. But when you think of what that remedy involves, potentially years before, as this process works its way through the commission and then in through the tribunal, the risk that even the fact that you participated in that results in a further backlash as it continues. I'm not sure that that brings a whole lot of justice when, if presented with the alternative saying, are there mechanisms to try to stop the amplification of this hate, to try to...
Are there mechanisms to stop the amplification of this hate? I haven't found hate yet.
To support the community.
It's such hate has such a high threshold, though, you know?
The whole, even in the absence of myself being made potentially whole for the harm that occurred, I think many would say, listen, I really just want this to go away. And if there are mechanisms to reduce the amplification, to reduce the harm, that's where I want to put our resources and thinking, as opposed to saying that.
You know what's so stupid about that? Because this is something that Arif Ronnie said. He said, I just want that to go away. I just don't want to see that mean tweet anymore. I just want that to go away. We're literally pandering to like the most precious people with it, like these precious neurotic control freaks. Am I wrong here? Like this is I just want that to go away. They just want it taken down. I remember Arif saying that. They just want it taken down. I just don't want to read that. I don't want to know that people like that exist and have those opinions. Just take it down, please. Yeah, let's pass laws based on that attitude. That's a great idea.
Yeah, well, I got mine in terms of some justice in a particular case.
Yeah, no, I do. Yeah. Okay, I'll stop there. We can talk about this one forever.
I'm also mindful of the time, so I'd like to switch a little bit, because the internet is a global phenomena, and other countries or institutions that have started to grapple with this. The European Commission, the European Union has started, Australia has started. When you compare C-63 with what other jurisdictions have done, how does it compare? Is Canada, were C-63 adopted? Would it be an outlier? Would it be around in the same ballpark as what the European and the Australians, for example, have done? Maybe Emily and then Michael.
Yeah, so it has picked elements from the different regimes, and I think that.
Was that a slip? Was that a Freudian slip? She used the R word. Not that R word. Regimes?
For example, have done. Maybe Emily and then Michael.
Yeah, so it has picked elements from the different regimes, and I think the best ones, it aligns with them, but it is narrower. So the Digital Safety Act in Europe covers a broader array of players. We aren't covering search engines. We're not covering private messaging. And the obligations are much broader, including all illegal content. They're even tackling disinformation, things that are under...
Yeah, that must have been a Freudian slip there. That's hilarious. Yeah, we are taking leads from other regimes, a government, especially an authoritarian one. A system or planned way of doing things, especially one imposed from above.
Regime.
That's funny. Yeah, we're taking cues from other regimes, absolutely. The most tyrannical ones, the most ruthless ones. Yeah, we want to do our jobs, right?
We aren't covering search engines. We're not covering private messaging. And the obligations are much broader, including all illegal content. They're even...
Illegal content is already illegal. I never understand why they loop this in. I don't get that. It's already illegal, and if it's illegal, it's probably already cracked down on aggressively by big tech anyway. Like I feel like this is one of their kind of like talking points that they love to bring up, but it's like, what does it even mean? What does that even mean? What would change? It's already illegal. Big tech already takes down illegal things. You know, they use this a lot, especially with like the sexual stuff and the pornography. And it's like, well, what actually changes there? Because big tech already does this, and that stuff's already illegal. It's crazy.
Tackling disinformation, things that undermine democracy. None of that. in scope for ours. So
well, that's actually positive. Again, not this bill is trash, throwing it out.
In Europe covers a broader array of players. We aren't covering search engines. We're not covering private messaging. And the obligations are much broader, including all illegal content. They're even tackling disinformation, things that undermine democracy. None of that's in scope for ours. So ours is much more narrowly targeted. And
I'm going to have to fact check her on that because she's been wrong already. They're probably going to try to add it in. What was it? Misinformation undermining democracy.
And we have elements of the UK one. I think there's a bit more similarities, but even the UK one is much broader. So I think that we've landed in the right place, given, I think, the legal climate and where we
the legal climate?
balance freedom of expression with other rights, and also really the capacity of a regulator. If you're building something from scratch, there's only so much you can scope in. Australia started very narrow and built out. We aren't as narrow where Australia started. They were just for child safety, but that ship has sailed. I mean, there's no way we could have just started with child safety. But it's a good start.
Speaking of child safety, throughout this 30 minutes we've watched, it's been brought up maybe 2 or 3 times and never with any sort of detail. Like the whole child safety thing, it's like we haven't been talking about that at all. We've been talking about hate speech. We've been talking about, hey, can I get thrown in jail for this? Can I throw somebody else in jail? Weaponizing these laws to bully people who have the wrong opinion or to stop bullying. Nothing has come up about the child safety stuff.
Michael. Yeah, I think Emily and I agree on this. It's worth noting, I mentioned off the top of my opening comments that where the government started in this process when they consulted is a much different place from where we are now. And I think that at one time they were thinking about importing some provisions from other countries that were far more problematic. And I think thankfully, they've dispensed with that. The one part that I think that's worth emphasizing, that Emily's response and frankly my response to this will focus on the online harms piece. And so the emphasis will be, as a point of comparison, what are you doing with the platforms? What kind of responsibility and potential liability are you imposing on those platforms so that they step up to deal with these various harms? And in that respect, I think Canada has done a nice job of striking a balance and drawing from what they've seen elsewhere. The problem, come back to it, and it's inescapable when you start debating this legislation, is that that's not the whole bill. And when you get this second part of the bill, having thrown in the criminal code provisions and the Human Rights Act provisions, those are not the parts that we're drawing lessons from. And you don't, I know less about how those other jurisdictions deal with those issues, but where the government really did, I think, engage in that comparative analysis, especially with respect to, we recognize the power that the platforms have. That law as it exists right now alone is insufficient to deal with some of the concerns, especially around the algorithms, the amplification, the opacity in how these platforms deal with these issues. In that respect, we've, I think, done a good job and drawn some powerful lessons from what has occurred elsewhere.
Interesting. So Geist likes the fact that the Canadian government would have more control over how big tech operates on the inside when it comes to censoring things, which is totally counterintuitive or totally like the different opinion he had of Bill C-11, which was about seeing what the government having control over algorithms, right? But I guess, I mean, the thing is that I feel like that point is so redundant. It's like we have big tech. They already have their own system of preventing online harms, and I'm pretty sure they use the same term. But Michael's like, no, I think we should help them. I think we should be able to see it. I think we should be able to see what they do. But everything else in this bill, he did bring up a good point of how the big problem is that's not the whole bill, right? It's a Trojan horse for a whole bunch of other nonsense. I wish he would push harder against that, or push that point harder, because it's this whole time the woman Emily who was supporting the bill, who helped contribute to the bill, is constantly saying how there's problems with it. Throw this thing out in the trash.
Does the fact that most of the platforms are based outside of Canada play a role in what Canadian government or Canadian legislation can do?
Sure, I can kick off if you want. I think Of course it does. I think that the legislation talks about mitigating these harms, doesn't talk about eliminating them. And I think there's a recognition that no legislation is going to entirely eliminate. But if you target the large players and potentially identify some other players along the way, that's enough of a starting point. It captures so many of the average users that at least you've had a positive effect in mitigating against some of the harms. And I think that's what we're trying to do here. And so I think there's a recognition that there will be thresholds about which organizations or which entities this applies to. And I think that while some are skeptical about law on the internet, are these companies really going to apply with Canadian law? And I think there's every reason to believe that especially the larger players will. I think that they recognize they do have a responsibility. There will be a willingness, indeed a desire, to ensure that they are compliant with this legislation. They may push back on certain elements of it, but by and large, platforms aren't themselves happy to see the kind of harms that are taking place online. And if we impose these kinds of obligations, most will say, yeah, this is something that they're willing to comply with.
That's really interesting for Michael to say that, based on the fact that the latest bill to pass about the Canadian internet was Bill C-18, which was trying to get social media companies to pay to distribute news in Canada. And now Meta has basically said, go F yourself. And to some extent, Google has said, they called the bluff of the Canadian government with poor legislation. And here's Michael Geist saying, no, I think the platforms will be totally compliant with everything the Canadian government says. Really? Because the last time we tried this, now I can't get news on Meta anymore. I can't get news on Instagram or Facebook anymore. Now all of a sudden, you think they're going to be compliant. Where is this coming from? Based on what? Based on a hunch? Based on what evidence? It's based on this goodwill argument that no, we all want to stop hate, right? So you'll let the Canadian government in on what you're doing, and you, a private organization, massive company who's super dialed in and super well operating, you think you're going to let the Canadian government, they'll let the Canadian government come see what we're doing, right? It's crazy.
Thank you. Emily.
Yes.
Actually, that being said, now I'm thinking that maybe that point isn't so strong. Maybe there's already a precedent set for this with Australia and the UK and how that works. So I guess with that being said, the infrastructure is already there for okay, we got another, now the Canadian idiot's going to come in and see how we do the algorithms. That's interesting. I'll have to look into that. All right, let's get through this, guys. We're almost there.
I think that enforcement has always been an issue. It's been that wicked issue with internet regulation since it was commercialized, but I don't think it's a reason not to pass laws. And we have in other contexts. Privacy commissioners investigate companies that impact Canadians that are based elsewhere. And
I do want to add, I brought this up earlier, but it bears repeating. They said, it's going to be hard for big tech companies who aren't based in Canada to get them to follow the rules. And there's actually a massive pornography company based in Canada that, once again, if they wanted to protect children online and the re-victimization, blah, 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 the sex exploitation, blah, 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 maybe they would actually focus on that company that's in Canada. But it's not going to get mentioned in this legislation. They're not going to frame it in that way to target this massive porn company because they don't care about kids, right? They don't care about protecting children online. That's just a Trojan horse bullshit.
I think that where we fit in is that we're not the first player stepping onto the scene because there are laws in the EU and the UK and Australia, and we're targeting the major global players. I agree with Michael that I don't think that they're going to have an issue. We're going to have an issue with them trying to shirk compliance in any way because they're having to already comply with more onerous obligations in other jurisdictions.
Thank you. Obviously,
all right. Well, I guess that answers my question, but we'll have to look into it nonetheless to see if that's actually true or not.
Part of this conversation is the issue of free expression and free speech, and a lot of criticism are saying that it's an attempt to censor, to limit free speech. And one of the ways that I think the government is trying to land in a place that is legal is the use of the definition of hatred that flows from, and Emily, you were mentioning this, the Supreme Court Canada decision in Walcott back in 2013, if I remember correctly. at the time, the Supreme Court kind of landed at a place that said that the use of the Human Rights Code of Saskatchewan was, yes, a limit to free speech, but was reasonable in a free democratic society according to Section 1 of the Charter, broadly speaking. Do you think that where the bar is set in the bill in terms of what is hatred is high enough to, on the one hand, solidly protect freedom of expression, which is a fundamental values of Canada, and I would say that for Jews who have been minorities everywhere they've been, but for Israel, the right to be outside of the mainstream sometimes is very important, has been historically important. So on the one hand, that freedom of expression is protected, while at the same time catching the worst elements of hatred. Like, is the government setting the bar at the right level? And two, is the definition clear enough or tight enough that it will do what the government wants it to do? I will start with Michael and then Emily.
Okay.
These are fantastic questions. I really like this guy.
Yeah, no, I think the fact that they have relied on prior jurisprudence is another positive within the legislation. You know, I think that had they worked to establish an entirely new definition, and because this invariably does involve some very difficult line drawing, it would quite clearly be challenged on those grounds alone. And so the fact that they're relying on something that is somewhat tested, I think already makes quite a lot of sense. You know, is this going to have a chilling effect? You know, the question becomes, well, where does this apply? In a criminal code context, I must admit, I don't think that this inclusion, I already mentioned it, I don't think the inclusion of the additional penalties makes much sense. I don't think it has any real effect in terms of on the ground the kind of hate that takes place. I think that this is primarily an enforcement issue. I wish law enforcement would enforce the laws as they stand now, and then we can see whether or not we've got shortcomings. But I think we've got more a failure of enforcement than we do a failure of the existing legislation when it comes to some of these some of these legislation. Is there the potential for a chilling effect? I mean, the answer may well be I can't speak for every individual. I mean, there may be some that look at this and say, well, this might have an effect, and I'm really concerned about it. I think for the vast majority of people, they don't really come close to this. It is a high bar. There are other safeguards and guardrails that are built into the system to seek to guard against it. And so, you know, I think many should be comforted by that. And I think that, and I alluded to it a moment ago, I think that we need to recognize that alongside the risk of a chilling effect from the legislation is the real world chilling effect that we have right now. So that when we have individuals who are afraid to speak because of the kind of hate that they themselves may face, that of course represents a significant issue and a limitation on their own freedom of expression. And we need to be conscious of that as we try to strike a balance with some of these issues.
Thank you.
Man, Michael, no. What? That was rough, bro. That was rough. Is the Supreme Court totally correct about everything? Will there be a chilling effect? He did not say yes or no. He basically said no with a big wall of text. And he's giving the classic Arif Virani argument in so many words, which is this will actually encourage free speech because people aren't free to talk right now because they're afraid. The implication being that this law will lock up all the scary people so us Jewish people can speak freely without being threatened. What? It's not going to have a chilling effect, but people are too afraid to speak out right now. And this legislation will help us speak out because other people, like the implication is because other people won't be able to speak out, isn't it? Like how would you speaking out, how will more speech legislation inspire Jewish people to speak out more if the speech legislation can only do anything but silence people? You totally lost me, Mr. Geist, on that answer.
To speak because of the kind of hate that they themselves may face. That, of course, represents a significant issue and a limitation on their own freedom of expression. And we need to be conscious of that as we try to strike a balance with some of these issues.
Thank you. Emily.
Hold on.
Yes.
There are other safeguards and guardrails that are built into the system to seek to guard against it. And so, you know, I think many should be comforted by that. And I think that, and I alluded to it a moment ago, I think that we need to recognize that alongside the risk of a chilling effect from the legislation is the real world chilling effect that we have right now. So that when we
sure, maybe there's a chilling effect from the legislation, but what about the chilling effect we have right now? People are afraid to speak out. Yeah, maybe this legislation will add a chilling effect, but people are already having a chilling effect. So let's just add to that chilling effect.
We have individuals who are afraid to speak because of the kind of hate that they themselves may face. That, of course, represents a significant issue and a limitation on their own freedom of expression. And we need to be conscious of that as we try to strike a balance with some of these issues.
So people are afraid to speak out because they're afraid they're going to get hated. So the idea is this legislation will help Jewish people speak out because the people that hate them will be silenced. Is that kind of the implication there? It's crazy.
Thank you. Emily.
Yes, and that's a good reminder that the issues of hate here are so far beyond, what this legislation is tackling. I don't think that we can get more precise than the definition that has been provided. It is, as Michael said, set out in Supreme Court jurisprudence. There's criticism about
it's crazy that they're just brushing over this Supreme Court definition. Crazy that they're just, oh my God.
The need to pinpoint something more precise, but you can't because we need to be able to engage in a contextual analysis.
So you don't need to be more precise because you need to engage in a contextual analysis. This is just getting broader and broader and broader.
Just 2 points. One is, so I wouldn't change the definition. What I would do for at least the Digital Safety Commission component, that Online Harms Act, I think that, the private platforms play such a key role here in setting out in their own terms and conditions how they manage this. Their digital safety plan shouldn't just be how they mitigate risks of harm. I think they also need to set out how they are promoting and protecting freedom of expression. And also I would add privacy and equality. But I think that needs to be front in mind in how they manage their services. Right now, that provision is not in there. The only obligation's on the commission, not the companies. When it comes to the criminal code provisions,
that is such a non-point. Did she really just say that we're concerned that the big tech isn't worried about free expression? That's crazy.
I mean, it sets out to define hatred, fine. It doesn't change anything, but it offers some clarity, perhaps. More concerning are the other dimensions of the criminal code provision, which I think that's where that chilling effect will happen. That standalone provision, risking, life in prison. I think that I suppose you could tweak it slightly to make it a little bit better, not make it life in prison, not remove from it that it's violating any legislation, maybe just keep it to other criminal offenses, or you just scrap it entirely. That might be the easiest solution here.
So you mean
wow, scrap it entirely. Emily, who contributed to building this legislation, maybe just scrap it. There's a thought.
you mean hiving the criminal code amendments off of this legislation? Is that what you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Richard, if I might, I just want to supplement on that because I think both Emily and I are in agreement that it might have made sense to have excluded that. I have to say that I think there was a particularly compelling case to have stuck specifically with the online harms as its own piece of legislation. I think, frankly, the way that they've targeted it made a lot of sense and, frankly, would have gone a long way to addressing some of these issues. And at a time when there has been enormous frustration at the lack of action by the federal government, by many governments, in dealing with online hate, they could have, or dealing with hate more broadly, not just online, they could have packaged the Criminal Code and the Human Rights Act provisions in a separate piece of legislation. I still would have problems with them, but at least it would not have sidetracked the good work that takes place, I think, with respect to the platforms. And frankly, the government would have had something that it could have pointed to say, okay, we are looking to try to deal with some of these issues. As it is, they run the risk, frankly, of bringing it all down and really bogging down and clouding the debate at a time when what we need, especially with some of the online harms related issues, is more clear-cut leadership and expeditious action.
So that's good. I mean, I'm glad he said that. Hey, we really need to throw this part out. Let's throw this part out. It's not good. It's going to weigh you down. It is going to weigh it down, without a doubt. That's probably easily over half of the bill, what he was talking about, by the way. Hey, this whole part, this huge chunk, all this criminal stuff, yeah, just throw all of that out. I don't like the Michael's stance here, though, because he still says that, hey, we want the government to have control over or be able to mess with big tech platforms to help them censor speech better. It's redundant. Big tech already does this, and this idea it really comes down to them. I hate to summarize it like this, but I really get the impression that some of the people on this Zoom call are really just mad at Elon Musk, and they want to have more control or influence, or be able to fine Elon Musk for anti-Semitic tweets that they read in the morning on their phone.
I want to go back to something that both of you mentioned about
safely in their nice home. By the way, they're totally safe. They're just reading someone's opinion they don't like on the internet. It's not that big a deal.
Digital Safety Commissioner. Two questions that I'm seeing in the chat. One is, how independent would that regulator be? Because there's this concern by some people that they would be at the direction of the government. So is the independence of that regulator protected or clear in the legislation? And if not, should it be clarified? And two, Michael, in your introduction, you were mentioning that commissioner might have too much power. I'd like to hear both of your insights on this. So I will start maybe with Emily.
Banger questions.
Yes, it's. I mean, the commission needs to be independent from government. I think it is inaccurate. What I have read that criticism saying that it would be government censorship. This isn't. This is set up as an independent body. The commissioners have.
How does that? That's such a naive thing to say.
Terms of, I think, 5 years. I mean, I would say it's more comparable to the idea that we have our privacy commissioner, and who I think is 7-year terms. Where there is some risk is the fact that in the end, government appoints the individuals. It needs to be approved. I think
it's not going to be government censorship. We need to have a right independent person, but the government is going to approve the people. It's not going to be government censorship, but the government is going to choose who has this power. Cool. How naive can you be?
If I recall, it needs to be approved by Parliament. So
okay, no, it's fine. It's going to be approved by Parliament. We're good. Guys, we're fine. Everything's fine. Don't worry. It's going to be government's going to choose the non-biased person. Don't worry, the parliament buildings filled with traitors are going to decide the right people to control speech online. Perfect.
It has a more bipartisan kind of nature to it that the individuals in the commission would actually have to be approved by those bodies. So it should operate independently.
It should. It might. It should. Listen to all these unconfident words.
And again, remember, its oversight is of companies, not of individuals. They're not making individual content decisions or holding individuals accountable here. So I think that when it comes to their power.
You know what? That's such a sleight of hand. They did the same thing with Bill C-11. I'm just realizing this now. I should have realized this earlier. They're saying, no, because with Bill C-11, they're like, we're not dealing with individual pieces of content and individual users. We're just dealing with big tech. It's like, yeah, you're dealing with big tech to affect things that will affect individual users. At the end of the day, it's going to be the individual content. Sure, you're going through big tech, but the result is going to be controlling the content of individual users on the big tech platforms. That's such a sleight of hand. I can't believe I didn't realize that sleight of hand they were doing there. My God. No, we're just holding the big tech accountable. Yeah, holding the big tech accountable to censor individuals. How are we doing in chat here? Are we falling asleep yet? All hail Trudolph. This woman trips over her own phrases again and again. She's an absolute hypocrite and liar. Hey, Adam, I didn't say anything. Let's let her, bury her own, dig her own hole here. Guilty of tweaking with greasy hair, says Andrew Simpson. What else we got? Alberta Climber. So independent of government funding as well? Okie dokie. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Oh my God. Supervillain says, hope the monetization is worth it. Probably not. Lol. Hey man, I'm putting all my effort into this to try and save free speech. I hate ads too. If you look back in the live, I was ranting about how I hate ads as well. But if you can sit through some of these, I will change the ad setting next time. Because to be fair, I may have put it on like you know what? I'm sorry. I don't like watching ads either. Daryl Skird says, what in God's name does Michael want to say that he's afraid to say? He's kind of afraid, isn't he? I was kind of getting that vibe too, that he's kind of like petrified and neurotic. Let's get through this. Oh my God, we're almost done. It's 15 minutes, although the first 15 minutes took us like an hour. Oh my God, 3 hours. Oh my God. Okay, let's do this, guys. Come on, let's go. Let's go. I'm out of my drink too.
If I can even jump ahead and guess, I know where some of Michael's concerns are, and I will say that this is an administrative body. It doesn't operate like a court. It has to follow. That means that the rules of evidence and how it proceeds is softer than a court. What it does have to follow is rules of procedural fairness. It has to be non-biased, has to be open, has to basically have due process rules in how it operates. And ultimately, if there is an issue, it can be taken to the federal court. So I'm okay with that process. I think where you can have debate is what should be detailed in the legislation versus later. The later parts, there's quite a bit of power to this commission, this body of 3 to 5 people, to write the regulations for the social media companies, to write out what they want in digital safety plans, to write out what they think kid safety should look like.
Hey, kid safety came up. Only 45 minutes in. 47, 29. Again, this sounds so redundant to me. I'm just writing notes. Just writing notes because I'm going to be, making content about this later to kind of cut through all this nonsense. Write digital safety. So they want this commission to write, some sort of manifesto of what they want big tech to do. I'm sure that big tech already has this. This sounds so redundant. Does the UK and Australia have their specific manifesto of what they want with their censorship? I mean, it's crazy. I'm just picturing the UK Digital Safety Commission, the Australia Safety Commission, now the Canadian Safety Commission. We want you to ban child porn, and it's like, yeah, we already do that. We already try to do that. We actually have thousands of employees here that already do that. But no, okay, yeah, okay, sure. You're gonna try to mess with us, foreign government, sure, yeah. We'll look out for the child porn. We're already doing that, but okay.
I think that's okay, because I think that is what's needed. There are guardrails saying this is what you have to have in, say, a digital safety plan. So I think it's landed appropriately, but I think that reasonable people might have different views about where that balance should be.
It's funny that, it's not, government censorship isn't a problem, but we're going to get people elected or chosen by the government or the parliamentarians to tell big tech what is hate and what is harmful content. These people are lying through their teeth, or they're incredibly naive, or like I said earlier, they clearly are they're being manipulated by tyrants to do this. Blink twice if you're being held captive, Emily. Blink twice if you're being held captive. These people can't be serious. No, there's not going to be any government censorship at all. That's not a concern at all for mine. We just got to elect the right people.
Thank you, Michael.
Okay. All right. Hopefully I'll be reasonable in saying that I do have some concerns. And I'll start just by noting first that we do need something to enforce this law. And I don't think we have a readily available option, so that it's not going to be the government. You don't want the government making decisions on content in this way. It's not going to be the CRTC, the Broadcast and Telecom Regulator, which I think is already out of its element in dealing with certain internet related issues. So we do need something.
Hey, okay. So, I mean, there's not the strongest points, but they're points nonetheless. Okay. I wish you'd harp on this a lot more, because there's a lot of criticisms you can give to the CRTC and how they are not set up to control the internet. That's a huge point. You can basically say the CRTC has been a failure for XYZ, and the CRTC has been a failure, and similarly, why would you get a government body to do this type of stuff if the CRTC, the government body, has already been a failure in doing this? But he's saying we do need something. which is weird. Let's see what he's going to see. Let's see what he's going to say next.
Something. And I also want to emphasize that I think trust in this legislation really depends in great measure on this commission. That I think that some of the concerns that you've been highlighting, Richard, I think they are very real. At the end of the day, much of the public confidence in this legislation is going to be dictated by this commission. And I think that there are, from my own perspective, reasons for concern.
Interesting. They make it seem like they're going to get the Avengers together. Who's this commission going to be? The public trust is going to determine who the commission is. They're going to get fucking Canada Man. They're going to get Mr. America, Team America, Captain America. They're going to get Spider-Man on the Safety Commission. What kind of bureaucrat are they going to get that's going to win the public's? Hey, we found this bureaucrat from the sewage and the swamp in Ottawa, and the public is going to trust them.
Concerns. I mean, Emily's articulated, why this, it's independence, and I agree with that. I don't see the independence issue as an issue. I have concerns about the size of the commission, quite frankly, when I think of just the wide range of kinds of issues that are going to come up in this context. You want people both that have expertise on issues like freedom of expression and privacy. You also want them to have an understanding of hate and harm and child endangerment and child-related issues. There's just, and how these platforms themselves function. You want some technical expertise. And then, of course, you want...
So something to point out here, Emily did the same thing when describing, this is what the safety commission should have this, should have that, should have this, should have that, should have this. None of this is in the legislation, by the way. None of this is clearly defined in the legislation. You guys are just kind of wishing this. You're wishing that, wouldn't it be great if we had this perfect digital safety commission that didn't censor what the government wanted to censor and was just so perfectly perfect on being able to solve complex subjective issues when it comes to human expression on the internet. Wouldn't that be beautiful? It's total utopian garbage, what both of these people are talking about. It's just wishful thinking. No, the government won't be tyrannical at all. We just need to elect the right people.
Want people to bring an independent view to all of this. I'm not convinced that the size of the commission, we have larger commissions, certainly with the CRTC, is the right size. But even more than that, the kind of power that it does have is remarkable in certain respects. It can issue rulings to make content inaccessible, conducts obviously investigations, it can demand any information it wants from these regulated services. It can hold hearings that, if it decides is appropriate under the circumstances, can be held in secret. The default is in.
Damn. I'm really glad that I watched this, because this is a lot of great stuff on what's actually in the bill itself. And this panelist is really asking incredible questions.
Is open, but it can say, no, in this instance, we want to hold it in secret. It will be establishing both regulations and codes of conduct. And this is very, very broad. The penalties are huge, potentially up to 6 to 8% of global revenues. And so it wields a lot of power. And then it does act, on its own with some amount of informality. And to me, this is a source of concern. So, for example, the legislation specifically states that commission's not subject to any legal or technical rules of evidence, and it speaks to the need to act informally and expeditiously. And while I recognize that it is positioned to establish some of its own set of rules, with great power comes great responsibility. And at a minimum, it seems to me that it is incumbent on the government to flesh out in far more detail where the limits, where the guardrails are around the commission, so that we aren't basically adopting a trust us approach with respect to the commission as part of so many of the elements of how this legislation ultimately gets interpreted and plays out.
This is so interesting because Geist has supported the bill in a way. He's been saying there are some good things that we need to deal with. He's also like, oh yeah, all of this stuff about speech and criminal speech, we should throw that out. And oh yeah, the one thing that we should keep, the Digital Safety Commission, we need to go back to the drawing board. There needs to be far more detail on this. So what is actually good in it? It's weird how Geist has kind of implied that he supports it, but when you get into the minutia, he's like, no, you need far more detail here. Throw all of that out. I don't know. Maybe he's just being timid in this Zoom call, but it's interesting how he's kind of implied that he supports the bill, but he's also like, oh yeah, no, we need far more detail here. This could be a huge fucking mess.
Sorry, go ahead.
A quick comment on that is okay, because I will say, it's really interesting point about the size of the commission, and I think that the list you gave, Michael, of the expertise is exactly the list of the kinds of expertise we need, so that supports the idea of a bigger commission. I would say that the idea of rules of technical evidence, that is actually in that is administrative law, isn't it? That is what the Privacy Commissioner, CRTC, all those regulators set up that way. And same when it comes to the inspection powers, that informality is kind of core to what administrative tribunals are. And I think that I wouldn't call them secret hearing. I would just say that they're closed hearings, and courts have closed hearings at times too. And there's some.
That's a bad PR word, Michael. We don't like secret. They're special. They're interesting. They're behind closed doors. Okay. It's just secret makes us sound like we're sneaky and we're up to something.
Really special scenarios here. If you're talking about child sexual abuse images and intimate images, I think it's fair to say, well, we want to know the circumstances around it. But that I suppose that is some of that trust element that you set out. But
just to be like the counterpoint to that would be, shouldn't we know more if sure, these are sensitive things of child sexual abuse material, but the public almost deserves to know where that's coming from, who's responsible for it, who uploaded this. Again, we're supposed to be defending kids. I kind of don't feel comfortable having a bunch of bureaucrats talking about that behind closed doors. I'd much rather that part be out in the open so we can, condemn vile people who distribute and produce child sexual abuse material. But instead, we're going to have a bunch of Ottawa bureaucrats privately talking about what we should do about, some of the most vile content on the internet. To me, just to be devil's advocate, maybe shouldn't that be more public information so we can condemn these vile, evil monsters? But it's about censoring speech. It's not actually about stopping pedophiles.
It is consistent too with what we see with what courts do, and that power to take down images is extraordinary. It is, but it is for two things: it's child sexual abuse material, and it is for intimate images.
Once again, if they brought up the Canadian company that's a huge porn empire, this what they're saying right now would sound a lot more genuine. But they don't. They just imply that no, it's only going to be Facebook where people are going to be uploading CP. That's child porn. This sucks. I can't even believe that this is. I turned off the ads, by the way. I'm surprised they're even sharing ads. I'm swearing. I'm saying swear words. Anyway, we're almost through it.
For me, I've always landed that you need a quick and easy remedy in that particular case. And if you were setting it out through a hearing or tribunal, just don't even bother. What you want is a commissioner with that power. That is consistent with what Australia is doing with their e-safety commissioner.
Thank you. I'd like to go briefly, because I'm looking at the time, mindful of the time. The issue of peace bond has drawn a lot of attention. So maybe one of you could explain what a peace bond is, but when I was speaking to the government, one of the examples they gave me is that, let's say John Doe is writing crazy anti-Semitic stuff on the internet, and one that raises a lot of question, and the fact that there could be a peace bond with all the process that peace bond that all the steps that need to be gone through before a peace bond is issued, that would be okay or reasonable to have, this John Doe should not be allowed within 100 meters of a synagogue or a Jewish community center and the like. So that's often the example that the government has given us. And I would like to hear your thought is the peace bond in those circumstances, does it make sense to use that tool that's already in existence in the context of online harm? Michael, and then Emily.
Okay. Well, first of all, there's an online element. There may be an offline element, of course, there as well. I think this is a more defensible provision. I think there is still, going to be sources of concern, in part because this ventures peace bonds into an area that we traditionally wouldn't see them. So, the idea of peace bonds, which one might think of as prior restraint, is used in a range of different spaces, and oftentimes one can well understand why you would want to use it. If someone is fearful of assault in a domestic situation, you may want to ensure that you've got a restraint put in place to try to guard against the event actually happening, and that's what this is.
That example is a real life violence, domestic assault. Okay, so the crime that's already illegal.
Trying to do, you've got enough evidence to believe that this is likely to happen. You want to prevent it from happening rather than find yourself in a position where you now have to remedy after the fact, and the harm has been caused. Putting this in.
So Michael Geist supports pre-crime.
A speech context, though, is different because it is certainly unusual to do it. And so I can well understand why there would be concerns associated with it. There are a significant amount of approvals and guardrails that are built into the process. And so I think it's something that I think we need to be working through with respect to the review that will ultimately take place before our committee to better understand, the precise uses and the guardrails that exist. I think as a concept, the idea of trying to prevent harm when we have a real notion, there's a real likelihood that it is going to occur, is certainly better than sort of after the fact trying to remedy or deal with the harm that takes place. And I further think that
we gotta listen to that again. This stuff's important.
Through with respect to the review that will ultimately take place before our committee to better understand, the precise uses and the guardrails that exist. I think as a concept, the idea of trying to prevent harm when we have a real notion, there's a real likelihood that it is going to occur, is certainly better than sort of after the fact trying to remedy or deal with the harm that takes place. And I further think that, and we've referenced it a few times, that in some ways the criminal code provisions have been tarnished by the inclusion of things like the life in prison, that it has muddied the debate around some of the other provisions as well. And that has made much of this discussion much more difficult.
Wow. I did not see that coming from Mr. Geist. So that's because he supports one of the most egregious things, in my opinion. That is by far one of the most egregious things. You know what? If we can prevent the harm, we should. So all of a sudden, punishing people, peace bonds, house arrest, ankle monitors, based on a suspicion that someone might commit a hate crime, based on what exactly? Because there's safe guardrails that are like, we're really good at predicting. This is Minority Report. This is Minority Report, and Michael Geist supports this. That's disappointing. That's very, very disappointing. Come on, Michael. This is also. Does this exist in the UK and Australia? Because this part of the bill is especially insane. Let's see what Emily says.
Thank you, Emily.
I entirely agree with Michael. I think that
of course.
This is where we can maybe clarify understanding is there. This is not a thought crime, a peace bond. It's this isn't Minority Report.
It totally is. It totally is. You're going to prevent crime before it happens based on a hunch because somebody said something hateful or anti-Semitic online. What was once again, we've been talking about hate this whole time. No one's defined any sort of thing. Oh, the Supreme Court definition is very clear. You guys haven't clarified anything.
This has been accused to be but there is a legitimate discussion to be had about whether it should be used in the context of a speech crime. And I suppose you could say
speech crime. That's a new one. It's not, guys. It's not Minority Report, but speech crime is real.
Yeah, it can be used right now for intimate images. So I guess you could call that, that's essentially communication and speech as well. But it is a de-escalation tool. So it's actually supposed to be a softer mechanism than the other. So there might be a legitimate use for it. But I am waiting to see, how this is discussed at committee and how they might ensure some constraint of it. But I do think that one, there might be a real potential value for that one to help address hate.
Thank you. Last question.
That's crazy, man. She's running out of gas. She's running out of gas in this Zoom call. No, that's a great way to address hate. Yeah, that'll work. That'll work great.
Question. So you are given full authority to legislate on online hate in Canada, and you have ultimate power to decide what to do with C-63. What do? Do you adopt the bill as is? Do you tinker with the bill, but ultimately adopt something that is, that looks like C-63?
This guy has such good questions.
Do you start from scratch? Or do you say, it's just a question of using existing legislation. There's enough tools in the toolbox to combat this hate online, and we should push for proper enforcement of existing legislation. Emily, then Michael.
I would say that the Online Harms Act proper, that's regulating social media, I think that could be passed now with just minor tinkering with it. Like, I think there's a few things I would change about it. The criminal code provisions, major concerns, major revisions, scrap it, or I think they need to make significant changes to that. the Canadian Human Rights Act, I'm now struggling with that. I think if you even asked me a few days ago, I'd say, no, pass that one as is. They've made important advances, but that weaponization issue really is weighing on me at the moment.
Thank you. Michael.
Yeah, I think I hinted at least my starting point here, which I would separate out the bill. And so I would put the Criminal Code and Human Rights Act provisions perhaps in their own separate bills and have a solid, robust debates around both of these issues, which would place the online harms piece, if not on a fast track, because I do think that there are still some areas where there is need of reform and there is need for study and potentially identifying issues that are not addressed in the legislation that perhaps could improve the legislation itself. So I certainly wouldn't toss it aside. I would seek to separate it, so to speak, not a solemn-esque separation, but rather moving ahead directly with the elements on the online harms piece. The one other piece, though, that I would say is that could improve the legislation itself. So I certainly wouldn't toss it aside. I would seek to separate it, so to speak, not a Solomon-esque separation, but rather
Solomon-esque? Is that a reference to the Bible? Interesting.
They're moving ahead directly with the elements on the online harms piece. The one other piece, though, that I would say is that I do not think that government gets to hold up a mission accomplished sign by saying, hey, we introduced this. It even doesn't get to put up a mission accomplished sign, even if it passes this. There is a need for leadership right now when we deal with some of these issues, and that means using the tools we have right now, both in showing leadership, in speaking out against anti-Semitism and hate, both online and offline, enforcing the laws we have right now. So government certainly needs to pay attention to this and prioritize this from a political perspective, but there is so much more that needs to be happening right now, and I think we've really suffered, at least in part, because governments at multiple levels haven't stepped up in the way that they must when it comes to this issue.
Wow. That's, I mean, Michael is sounding like a tyrant himself right now. He's basically saying, hey, we should be arresting people by now. We got plenty of laws that we could use to, fuck with these anti-Semites. That's what I'm hearing from this, but am I reading that properly?
So thank you very much, both of you. Before I let my chair finish do the closing remarks, I want to personally thank you. I wanted to say to the people, I tried to go through all the questions that were in the chat.
Okay, that's good enough. Wow, guys. Wow. We made it through. Oh my gosh, I'm exhausted. That was really good though. That was really good stuff. That was really good clips in there. Lots to go over. Man. Michael Geist. I mean, there was some good things that Michael brought up. He is more of a legal expert than me, so I do at least respect that. There are some decent clips. There are some decent points that he brought up that I'm definitely going to weaponize to try and stop Bill C-63. Yeah, I'm also thinking that, when it comes to politics and pushing for legislation or pushing for what you want, the same tactics and the same sort of principles apply as they would for sales or for negotiation. And if you look at the art of negotiation and how to get what you want when negotiating, you ask for more than that you want. You ask for more than what you truly want. In sales, they kind of example in sales would be price anchoring. So let's say you're selling something and you want to sell it for $50. Okay, you can an easy way to do that is to say, hey, this is $100, but it's actually on sale for $75, and then the person there is like, I don't know if I really want $75. Seems like a little bit much. And then you say, you know what? How about this? I'll give it to you for $50. I'll give you a deal. And then the person walks off thinking they got a great deal. Hey, I got this for $50. When in reality, the salesperson was like, well, I didn't lie, but I misleaded them and said, yeah, I want $100 for it. This is how much it's worth. And then they get haggled down, negotiated down to $50, which is where they wanted to sell it for, right? I suspect the same thing, because let's face it, you got to give credit to this, this Canadian regime. They've been messing with us. They've been pulling off insane stuff in terms of robbing our rights in Canada. They know what they're doing. The propaganda of Justin Trudeau should not be taken lightly. You know, they've brainwashed our nation to hate themselves, guys. They're doing a good job in terms of what their goals are. And along with that, when it comes to passing this legislation, I'm now thinking that this is part of their negotiation tactic to pass parts of Bill C-63, right? So I want to just get the Digital Safety Commission. I just want to get the Digital Safety Commission so the Canadian government can start to control the algorithms and start to slowly censor Canadians, right? So I'm not going to start by just saying that's all I want. No, I'm going to say that I'm going to pass a bunch of speech laws as well to broaden the definition of hate speech. And I'm going to threaten to bring back the Human Rights Act, or the Human Rights Code, Section 13 of the Human Rights Code. It's $100. It's a lot. And then people are going to push back. That's way too expensive. That's way too expensive. That's way too much, as you were seeing in this kind of chat with CIJA. And then they're like, you know what? How about this? How about I'll just sell it to you for $50 and we just pass the Digital Safety Commission and we'll take out that other stuff. And then everyone's like, yeah, all right. I got this thing for $50. When in reality, we got fucking ripped off. And now the government is going to add another layer of censorship onto social media platforms. So they're going to be able to censor people even more effectively. That's the net result. I mean, it's certainly not as like, you know, the pressure would obviously be off in terms of like just being able to easily throw people in jail and persecute them. But still, I reject that entirely. Just because Australia and the UK did it doesn't mean that we need it too. I need to do specific research though on the differences of what the UK and Australia has and what they're suggesting with us. I know there's a huge amount of similarities, I'm sure, but I'm just I mean, you know what? It doesn't even matter. We're going to get the whole bill thrown out anyway. Guys, if you want to support my mission to save free speech in Canada, we have a documentary coming up that's going to be exposing all of this stuff. And it's going to be very, very good. It's going to be illuminating for people. We're going to get more Canadians into the fold and upset about what's happening in our country and letting them know how they can do something about it. You can go to givesendgo.com/savefreespeech. That's how you can support. This documentary is going to be, like, as I said, exposing the people, exposing the true agenda behind these censorship bills, behind this tyrannical bills. Hey, we got a huge donation by Man on the Mountain. Hey, shout outs to you, man. Thank you so much for the $100 towards saving free speech in Canada. Most important issue in Canada right now. Thank you so much, sir. Appreciate the donation. I assumed his gender because he said Man on the Mountain. Anonymous giver gives $20. Thanks for fighting this essential fight. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for the donation. Appreciate it. And yeah, we're also on social media. We're also on Facebook and Twitter at SFS Canada. That's SFS Canada. Let me bring it up. Here we are on Twitter. SFS Canada. And it's the same on Facebook. So if you go to facebook.com/SFS Canada, the same thing will come up. And our website's SaveFreeSpeech.ca. And on Instagram, if you go at SaveFreeSpeech.ca, one word, you'll also get our Instagram. Well, lots of stuff coming down the pipe. That was a really productive stream, actually. I'm really glad we went over all of that. I know it was very long. It's shout outs. Hey, 07's in chat if you hung around the whole time. It's amazing. Yeah, Edgy TV says, even if Bill 63 doesn't pass, they'll still relentlessly try to censor and attack us. Yeah, exactly. You know, the cops are already showing up at people's houses for what they're posting online. So, hello. It's crazy how watching that stuff will like kind of lull you to sleep of like, maybe the legislation isn't that bad. No. Eye on the prize. They're tyrants. We know what they want. Andrew Simpson, diversity is a strength amongst our own. Greg does great work. 07. Thanks, Andrew Simpson. I mean, diversity of thought is great. We love that. Neuro-linguistic programming, says Art Story. I wonder what you're referring to there. 420 all day says that was fucking painful. Yeah. Wow. That honestly, I'm glad we sat through all that. There's a lot of good stuff in there. John Smith, do you simulcast everywhere? I do not. Right now, I'm only streaming on YouTube. I do want to change that. I want to set up my Rumble channel and do all that. Post in chat where you want me to stream right now. Post in chat where you want this stream to be other than YouTube. I might invest in like a streaming service that streams to different platforms, blah, blah, blah. But please, in chat, let me know where you want this to stream. Guys, thanks so much for hanging around. We got to wrap it up. It's been fun hanging out with you guys. It's been fun. It's nice to have the group chat there hanging out. I really enjoyed the kind of funny comments, bullying some of the people that we were responding to. It's a good like spirit. In the spirit of saving free speech, I think we should probably kind of be poking fun and bullying people a little bit and making fun of them. I feel like I need to shower though after watching all of those neurotic Jewish people go on about how worried they are about everything. Oh my God. Yeah. Do you know how many churches have burnt down in Canada? Like burned to the ground. Gone. And I kind of resent the fact that I'm playing, victim Olympics. But from a victim perspective, as Emily was saying, we need to look at this from a victim perspective. Daryl Skirt says Rumble. Does Rumble charge for Rumble Studio? Probably. I should look into Rumble Studio, actually. That's a good idea. Lee Stewie says Telegram. Trent Dabb says stream everywhere. John Smith says everywhere. IGTV says Rumble. 420 all day says CNN. Maybe I should stream on CNN. Good idea. That might work. Like 150 by now. What was that? Daryl Skirt says Rumble and Embertree would be good too. GTV might be a good option too. Yeah. Well, hey guys, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for spending time. I'm starving. I have all these notes to now organize, which is great, but a lot of great clips in there. I think to be safe, I'm just going to download that video right now too, just to have like a raw version of it. All right, guys, thanks again for watching. Shout outs to Flip SR5.twists. Shout outs to Lee Stewie for hanging out. Raging Against Machine. Daryl Skird. Trent Dabbs, thanks for moderating. Edgy TV and Lee for moderating. Andrew Simpson. Fight for Freedom. Thanks for hanging out. Derek Nelson. As an American in Minnesota, we're going through our own things, but I have so much love for you all in Canada. If there is going to be a fight, I want to be there with you. Appreciate it, man. Appreciate it. It's always nice connecting with Americans who get it. I feel like Americans are on another level though in terms of opposing this tyranny and just really hating it and standing up and having no patience for it. But thank you for hanging out, Derek. Kristen Benny. At some point, it would be nice not playing defense and be ahead of them. Yeah, totally. Absolutely. Totally agree. And that's why I'm trying to, get ahead of the Conservative Party on this issue and to try and help them lead the charge, or not help them lead the charge, but lead the charge for them to like fall in line. Because sure, we're opposing the legislation, but kind of in the background or at its core, this is about saying fuck political correctness. This is about saying actually fuck woke progressives and this sort of tyrannical attitude they have towards everything. Canadians are already afraid to speak their mind. We need to change that. Not only do we need to stop this bill, but we need to encourage Canadians to actually use your free speech while you have it. Let's turn this around. I feel like this is a good moment in our history to be like, hey, remember when we almost lost free speech? Yeah, let's start to say fuck you and turn this ship around. Okay? It's absurd. Anyway, guys, thanks so much for hanging out. 07's in chat. we'll talk to you on Thursday. I'm going to be interviewing that gentleman who got his CBC, canned, or sorry, his interview canned off of CBC. But thanks for hanging out once again. Have a good evening. I'll talk to you soon. Maybe I'll play a song next time. Later.